Hello, a very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Coming up on the show today, a blitz on Beirut as the IDF targets Hezbollah's leader.
And another big day in the Premier League for Manchester City and Pep Guardiola, but can they extend their lead?
It's Saturday, the 28th of September. After a major hit on Hezbollah's headquarters in Beirut, Israel unleashes a wave of strikes across Lebanon overnight. The fate of Hassan Nasrallah, the group's leader and Israel's intended target, remains unclear.
The Israeli Prime Minister returns home from New York today after authorising the Beirut strikes, with questions about what retaliation Israel could face and what it plans to do next.
At least 43 people are killed in Hurricane Helene as it barrels across 4 US states. We report from a devastated Florida coast.
When I'm with her, I'm reminded of the virtues of the English.
But isn't she American?
Exactly.
Legend of British stage and screen, Dame Maggie Smith dies aged 89. We reflect on her most memorable moments. And a very important mission for the Royal Navy sees several turtles returned home.
In sport, Lucy Bronze scores a stunning first goal for Chelsea in the WSL as they thrash newly promoted Crystal Palace 7-0.
Hello, very good morning and thanks for joining us here today. Israel is continuing to strike targets in Lebanon after a blitz on Hezbollah's headquarters. The fate of the group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, remains unclear. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has cut short his visit to New York to return to Israel. Well, in the early hours of this morning, there were more strikes on Beirut. Israel's military says their strikes on strategic terror targets belonging to Hezbollah, including weapons production facilities and key command centres. Well, in a moment, we'll get more on Hassan Nasrallah, Israel's intended target. But first, our international correspondent John Sparks reports on the attack on Hezbollah's headquarters.
If there was a lingering suggestion of a ceasefire in Lebanon, it was destroyed in a series of deafening explosions in Beirut. The Israeli Defense Force deploying overwhelming firepower in the city's southern suburbs. Clouds of smoke and dust saturating the sky. The target was Hezbollah's Central Command headquarters. Israel said it was embedded under residential buildings in a district called Dahia. The result, in the words of a Lebanese minister, was complete decimation. The destruction of 4 to 6 apartment blocks. And in images broadcast from the scene, we see slabs of concrete and gaping craters, and local residents searching for friends and loved ones in the dark. The number of casualties is expected to be high. It is one of the most densely populated parts of Beirut.
We are 100 meters, maybe less, from the blast site. We've seen ambulances screaming up and down this road, heavy machinery as well, big diggers going in to move the rubble. And we have seen pictures of twisted metal, rubble, the product of large Israeli munitions, 2,000-pound bunker-busting bombs.
This is the 5th attack on this suburb in the past week, with Israeli media claiming that Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was the target. Lebanese sources later reported he was unharmed, although Hezbollah itself has said nothing. Israel has defended its operation.
After almost a year of Israel warning the world and telling them that Hezbollah must be stopped, Israel is doing what every sovereign state in the world would do if they had a terror organization that seeks their destruction on their border. taking the necessary action to protect our people so that Israeli families can leave their homes safely and securely.
At the UN General Assembly, the sight of Israel's Prime Minister was too much for some, yet he brought his own supporters to hear a defiant set piece. The campaign against Hezbollah would continue.
Israel's soldiers have fought back with incredible courage and with heroic sacrifice. And I have another message for this assembly and for the world outside this hall. We are winning.
Netanyahu made no mention of negotiation. Israel's wars in Gaza and Lebanon will continue.
We will fight until we achieve victory, total victory. There is no substitute for it. Israel must also defeat Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Shortly after he finished speaking, the strikes began, his office releasing this picture of the Prime Minister authorizing the attack. These blasts have unnerved the city. They are the biggest since the conflict began. And with the fate of Hezbollah's leader unknown, fear builds throughout the region. John Sparks, Sky News, Beirut.
So who is Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah's elusive leader and Israel's reported target? Well, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah became leader of the Shia militant group Hezbollah in 1992, aged just 32, after his predecessor was assassinated in an Israeli helicopter strike. Nasrallah has not been seen in public for years over assassination attempt fears. Instead, he's mostly seen in stage-managed live streams to his followers. With the support of Iran, he's transformed Hezbollah into the most powerful paramilitary group in the Middle East and a leading political force in Lebanon. Under Nasrallah's leadership, Hezbollah has helped train Hamas fighters as well as militias in Iraq and Yemen. He's also been able to secure missiles and rockets from Iran for use against Israel. Well, let's speak now to our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, who joins us live from Beirut for us this morning. Hello to you, Alex. More strikes overnight. Give us a sense of the impact that this latest round of attacks is having there and what the reaction's been in Beirut.
Well, it was a very rocky night for everyone in Beirut, but not just Beirut, not just the capital. Huge strikes, massive strikes down in Tyre, where we'd just come from a few hours earlier. Lots of buildings being hit down there, including a hotel where a lot of the foreign media were staying. But the streets of Beirut this morning are packed with people who have fled Dahia, one of the main sites of the attacks, which kept on going until very early morning today. You can see people have been sleeping on pavements in their cars. We've spoken to this particular family who came all the way on their truck. They were only about, I would say, a couple of kilometres from Dahia. There's a family of 40 grandchildren, children, a lot of children who came, 31 children or so who came on that truck. We've been speaking to all the way down this front. The Corniche is basically packed with displaced people. I think the implications of what's happened overnight are going to be reverberating throughout Lebanon for days, weeks. We're talking about a man who is the absolute head of Hezbollah, the strongest, most powerful non-state fighting actor in the region aside from Iran. The economy minister, the Lebanese economy minister, has told Sky News he thinks all red lines have been crossed, that this is a full-blown war, full-blown attack on Lebanon by the Israelis, and the fear and anxiety amongst people as they're waking up this morning with nothing but the clothes that they're standing in and whatever small things that they've managed to grab, not knowing what's going to happen today. We know that the Middle East Airlines is the only airline that's still operating. We've seen flights already leaving from the airport this morning. The British Embassy has advised all Britons who are still in Lebanon to take the next available flight. Other embassies, such as Canada, have reserved seats on the MEA flights that are going out. According to the airport, there's an increased amount of people who are heading towards the airport. I certainly heard a lot of Israeli jets flying low and slow over the capital through the nights, and there's been a warning from the Israeli forces that seems to implicate that they will attack the airport if they think it is being used for anything other than evacuating and taking out civilians. They've issued a clear warning that if they believe any weapons are being brought in through the airport, they won't wait, they won't stand for that. And the implication seems to mean that they're probably going to attack the airport if there is a suspicion by them that that is what it's being used for. A lot of fear and anxiety on the streets of Beirut, and I don't think that's going to dissipate. A lot of people from Dahi are just too scared to even talk to us because they feel they are being targeted. And remember, the attacks came a very short time after the Israeli Prime Minister delivered an incredibly bellicose speech at the United Nations in which he said that he believed every Lebanese kitchen and garage and bedroom had a Hezbollah rocket or missile inside it. The implication being that he sees the whole of Lebanon as part of Hezbollah. Clearly that's not true. A lot of people that we were speaking to in downtown Beirut were extremely against Hezbollah, criticizing them for bringing this war on Lebanon, but at the same time, very, very fearful of Israel, very, very negative of what they're seeing as the Israeli attacks on Lebanese people, with a large number of these people, Lebanese families as well as Syrian families, many Syrians having fled here from Syria, some many years ago, 11 years ago, and now a couple of them talking about how they moved several times during the night to try and get out of the way of the bombing.
Alex, thanks very much indeed. Alex Crawford there in Beirut. Well, let's now join our Security and Defence Editor, Deborah Haynes, who's in Tel Aviv for us this morning. Hello to you, Deborah. So Israel says it targeted Hezbollah's headquarters in its attack last night, although the fate of Hezbollah's leader isn't entirely clear. But what could the potential impact of these strikes be on the group, do you think?
Well, I mean, clearly, if the strikes have actually taken out the leader of Hezbollah, then that would be a significant, stating the obvious, blow to the group. I mean, it's clearly, it will be one of the main targets for Israel in this operation. Like you say, they've been going after commanders underneath Nasrallah over the last 10 days since they escalated their operation against Hezbollah, and clearly taking out the leader of a group is the best way to destroy its morale, its command and control, its focus. The leader of organisations, you'll remember obviously with the American so-called war on terror that was started after the 9/11 attacks against New York and Washington by Al-Qaeda, the absolute stated intent was to go after Osama bin Laden. You'll remember as well ISIS, the Islamic State that grew up in Iraq and Syria. The leader of that group, I mean, there were different leaders. They were getting killed each time they became in charge. But Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, again, the killing of him, that was a massive moment. But it's an interesting contrast with how Israel has been trying to target the leader of Hamas in Gaza for the past near year now, and so far failed to do that. So the fact that they have had the confidence to launch this huge strike in Beirut, apparently to go after Hassan Nasrallah, really points to exquisite infiltration by Israel of the Hezbollah ranks, that they had information intelligence on the whereabouts of its leader, which would be, you'd imagine, the most closely held secret. And even if it turns out that he is still alive, there has still been significant damage to the group's ability to coordinate. You'll remember those pager and walkie-talkie strikes, attacks just over 10 days ago now, taking out the ability of Hezbollah to safely have trust and faith in their communication devices. And then since then, the striking and the confirmed killings of a number of very senior commanders in that group, it will have created a huge sense of disarray, of chaos, and then a difficult ability to regroup and work out how they strike back.
Yes, and that's the big question, isn't it? What is Hezbollah's next move? What might Iran's next move be? And also, what will Israel do next?
Well, it's really important to remember when you talk about Hezbollah to think about Iran, which is its chief backer, chief financier, chief weapons provider, and clearly chief warrior right now, you'd imagine, as they try to work out what's happened to Hassan Nasrallah and how they respond. The calculation on the Israeli side throughout this escalation in their attacks against Hezbollah, which began at the beginning of last week, has been a belief that Iran does not want to go into all-out war with Israel, does not want to risk losing Hezbollah over an all-out confrontation. But clearly, in this, Iran is not calling the shots. It's Israel that's very much on the attack, on the offensive, increasingly escalating its strikes. And there will come a moment where Iran is going to have to make a decision whether to continue to absorb these punches or whether it does try to strike back or maybe give the green light to Hezbollah to start launching some of its longer-range, more potent missiles towards Israel. We just had a statement released by the Israeli military saying that a surface-to-surface missile was fired from Lebanon towards central Israel, and it was intercepted and didn't cause any damage, and actually the air raid sirens didn't come on. But it's a reminder of the potential for it to escalate. But equally, were that to happen, you ask about what Israel could do next. Israel really looks to what happened in April, when you'll remember Iran, for the first time, launched a barrage of missiles and drones directly at Israel. And in that moment of crisis, the Americans, the British and a number of Arab allies in the region came to Israel's defences, and Israel will surely be hoping that it can continue to press this offensive and then rely on its allies to protect it should Iran decide to retaliate.
OK, Deborah, thanks very much indeed for that. So let's get another view on this now. Joining us is Yossi Mekelberg, who's Associate Fellow at the MENA programme at Chatham House. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us. I know that you're just back from a visit to Israel and the border with Lebanon. So give us your perspective. How great an escalation would you say these latest strikes are on Beirut?
But at this point, one would have thought that either military operation that started with the planting of the pager and escalated step by step with air bombardment and even suggestion of a ground invasion was aimed at forcing the hand of Nasrallah to back down, to negotiate, going back to UN Resolution 1701 of 2006 and withdraw his troops to the Litani River. If it's to end the attempt was on the life of Nasrallah, it means that the aim is very different. The aim is completely to reduce the capabilities and the leadership of Hezbollah altogether, and as much as a signal to Hezbollah, to Iran as to the Hezbollah.
Well, yes, and Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader, as we say, thought to have been targeted, but those close to Hezbollah say that he's alive and well. We've had no official word, though, from Hezbollah. What would it mean for this conflict if he was killed by Israel?
I mean, Israel managed to eliminate much of the leadership, but no one is more identified with the Hezbollah than Hassan Nasrallah. He was the helm for 32 years. He made Hezbollah, as a military force, as a political force in Lebanon, outside Lebanon, represented resistance against Israel. more than anyone else, I think, in the region, definitely close to the border with Israel. Again, this is it means that Israel reached a conclusion that there's no negotiation with Hezbollah, no negotiation with Hassan Nasrallah, but the only way forward is eliminating Hezbollah, both as a military force and a political force. Now, all leaders have eventually a replacement, but in this case, it would be very difficult, at least in the short term, maybe longer than that, to replace someone like him. But as you said, we don't know what's the fate of him and what happened to him. It's also a sign that Israel has quite accurate intelligence where the leadership is almost at any given moment.
So what happens next? What might Hezbollah's next move be? And what about Iran?
Now, this is the big question. What we saw overnight, that there were at least 65 rockets fired into Israel. There is a missile probably reached as far as Tel Aviv, though it landed in the sea. So for Hezbollah now, when to a large extent it is on the run under massive attack, is to demonstrate that it can still fire rockets and missiles into Israel. So whatever Israel is doing, it still has some military capability. And the question is, for how long and to what effect it can still fire rockets and missiles. Then big question whether, since Hezbollah is one of Iran's biggest strategic assets in building this ring of fire around Israel, whether, again, we need to wait to see what happened to Nasrallah, but even if he's not hurt or if he's injured and still alive, if this is the point that Iran said that it can't sit quietly, it needs to do something in order to defend its strategic asset, or basically all this idea of axis of resistance is not more than a mantra and doesn't exist as such.
OK, well, Yossi Meckelberg, it's always interesting to get your take on events. We do appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Let me just bring you some breaking news about what the IDF, the Israeli Defence Forces, are currently saying about their operation against Hamas. We've obviously been discussing its attacks on Beirut and on Hezbollah, but in the last few minutes, the IDF have said that they've eliminated the head of the Hamas terrorist network in southern Syria. They say that overnight last night, following IDF intelligence, they struck and eliminated the terrorist Ahmad Mohammed Fard, head of the Hamas network in southern Syria. They go on to say, this is the Israeli Defence Forces, say that Ahmad Mohammed Fard was responsible for carrying out terror attacks against IDF troops and the State of Israel from the area of southern Syria, including firing projectiles towards the Golan Heights area. And they say he was eliminated while planning to carry out an imminent terror attack. The IDF go on to say that they're continuing to operate to eliminate Hamas terrorists wherever they are. So that's news just in. Israeli Defence Forces saying that they've eliminated the head of the Hamas terrorist network in southern Syria. Any more details on that or reaction we'll, of course, bring to you. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, Hurricane Helene has caused destruction across 4 southeastern US states. We'll have the latest from a battered Florida coast. Plus, we'll be discussing the stories making the news today with journalist and author Janelle Aldred and reporter at The Spectator, Cindy Yu.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Were you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited. I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
At least 43 people have died across 4 states as Hurricane Helene continues to cause devastation across the US. The Category 4 storm has left regions flooded, thousands stranded and millions of houses without power. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner has this report.
In the seaside town of Cedar Key, they don't know how much more of this they can take. Helene was the 3rd hurricane to strike here in just over a year. First came Idalia, then Debbie, and now this, the worst yet.
It's like losing a family member, it really is.
Stoney's liquor store is strewn across the street.
It tore down shelving, it tore down concrete walls, got in here and destroyed everything, and just a total loss.
Keegan works in the shop.
We've rode out many hurricanes here in the past 13 months. So, I mean, we are no strangers to catastrophe. I doubt that some of the owners will rebuild.
Winds of 140 miles per hour ripped through here, but it was the 10-foot storm surge that did the damage. Homes, restaurants, businesses all swallowed. Residents haven't yet been allowed to return to Cedar Key. When they do get here, this is what they'll find. It must have been utterly terrifying for those who didn't evacuate as a wall of water came towards them. The heft of Helene is most striking. Treasure Island is hundreds of miles from the point of impact. But look at this. 5 people have died in this area, at least 2 drowned. And almost 5 million people across 5 states are without power. Helene's impact extending far beyond Florida. Georgia isn't usually affected by hurricanes. This is different. In parts of North Carolina, officials are calling this the worst natural disaster of a lifetime, and a warning from the state's governor.
Flooding will continue through the weekend in some areas and may even occur in areas that don't typically flood. With the rain that they had already been experiencing before Helene's arrival, this is one of the worst storms in modern history for parts of western North Carolina.
the path of destruction continued into Tennessee. Staff and patients were evacuated to the roof of this hospital, engulfed by floodwater. Helene may have been downgraded on the hurricane scale, but numbers don't tell the story here. This is historic flooding. It's widespread and it's not over yet. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Cedar Key, Florida.
Lots coming up for you in a moment, including plenty of sport around.
Yep, it was a busy weekend coming up. There's a few things happening yesterday, lots to reflect on from yesterday, particularly last night, and some of those press conferences. Pep Guardiola not quite over Manchester City's 2-2 draw with Arsenal last week. The frustration between him and Arteta has continued. Chelsea hit 7 goals past Crystal Palace, with England international Lucy Bronze scoring a stunning first strike for the club. And in cricket, England showed their firepower with bat and ball as they levelled the one-day international series with a 186-run thrashing of Australia in a rain-shortened match at Lord's.
This conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello, welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, we're going to take you through the morning papers with journalists Janelle Aldred and Cindy Yu.
And we'll bring you the sport. They're still talking about the dark arts. Nothing to do with Harry Potter, but it is quite.
And we'll tell you who's talking about it as well.
Pep and Arteta, yeah.
More on that, I'm actually giving it away now. Still more on that in a moment. In the meantime, though, our top stories here this morning. And Israel is continuing to strike targets in Lebanon after a blitz on Hezbollah's headquarters. The fate of Hezbollah's leader, Israel's reported target, remains unclear. At least 44 people have died across 4 states after Hurricane Helene struck the US. The Category 4 storm has left areas flooded, houses without power and boats overturned in harbours. Charities have said it's concerning how many women are increasingly turning to suicide prevention services after figures showed a 30% increase in female suicides in a decade. Now then, we've got a picture of Dame Maggie Smith up behind us because we did want to talk about her and reflect on her for just a moment because after the news yesterday, we love her and the tributes have been pouring in and actually they're all quite similar. They all talk about her extraordinary range, the fact that she could do serious drama and achingly funny comedy just as well. And she did theatre, she did film, she did TV. She was just an incredibly versatile performer.
Yeah, a brilliant stage actress, which I think was perhaps her first love. You know, a brilliant actress in films. How many Oscars did she win? Was it a couple? Yeah, a couple of Oscars, including one for The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, which is the first film I ever saw her in and just thought, she's brilliant. And that was quite a sort of racy film at the time, wasn't it? But she was just so good in Downton Abbey. I mean, she was good in Harry Potter because all the kids loved her, Professor McGonagall, Wands in the Air, get rid of Voldemort with, you know, power and love. But her lines in Downton just kind of stole the show. And I always wondered whether she made some of them up herself or whether they were just all scripted. Like, I don't dislike him, I just don't like him, which is quite different.
And Julian Fellows actually did an interview with us yesterday and said how brilliant she was to write for because, you know, he knew that she had such range and could do those withering put-downs so brilliantly.
Yeah, and it kind of like, it stole all the scenes. On looking at Matthew Crawley's new fiancée, so that's Mary's replacement. Well, I suppose looks aren't everything. You know, she had that thing where, you know, really old ladies sometimes just don't care and they just say what pops into their head.
Yeah, and
I'm 100%.
And I love the fact that she still was working, you know, late in life.
Oh, yeah.
And Jackie, you're like that now, so I'm sure.
I know. I did think that as I said that. Yeah. Which is my role model, what can I say? When Isabel Crawley took one of her observations as a compliment, she went, oh, I must have said that wrong.
Great stuff, great stuff.
Just so brilliant. Oh, am I doing sport now?
You are doing sport, yeah. Don't go away.
Right. Let me just quickly tell you what we're going to talk about. It's really cool, the sort of backlash from last weekend's 2-2 draw between Arsenal and Manchester City. And, you know, it's all gone on about the dark arts and time wasting that Arsenal did. And Arsenal like, well, what are we meant to have done? And more dark arts talk, nothing to do with Harry Potter. Midweek, he said, I've been there before. I was there for 4 years. I have all the information. So I know, believe me, talking about Man City. But what was he relating to? What was he talking about? And Pep said, yeah, you have to explain yourself. What were you talking about? Anyway, apparently it's war now.
As if it wasn't before.
I know,
yes,
but
it really is now.
But it really is now. Let's have a look.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
I backed Arsenal at the start of the season because I just felt as though when a team's hunting you down, eventually they get there more often than not when they're getting closer and closer. And Arsenal, I thought today felt like a monumental defining moment in this journey that Arsenal are on of trying to get to a league title. You know, 2 seasons ago, they quite simply fell apart in the last 10 games. Last season, they go so close, and then you think, right, OK, they're learning, they're maturing. And some of their play, by the way, in the second half, not just the defensive play, but, you know, you think of sometimes you used to admire the old Italian teams or the old sort of, if you like, teams in Europe that would be able to get through and waste time and do things that frustrated the life out of you, but because they were so experienced. So they demonstrated that in the second half and just didn't get over the line. So, look, you know, it's nothing to do with wanting Manchester City to not win the title or Arsenal to win the title. It's, in fact, we're effectively neutral with these two teams. But you just think today and tonight, where will we be in April and May with this game? Will we be talking about going back to that final minute and what happened with the John Stones? Or will we be thinking that City win the title by 1 point and that moment determines it? it's ridiculous because there'll be drop points and there'll be mistakes and there'll be lots of victories before the end of the season, but it is that type of situation when you're up against Pep Guardiola. He makes you feel that way.
And there are other teams, Jamie. You're allowed to mention Liverpool, who were top this morning. How are you feeling about the title race?
Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit similar to last season, where Liverpool are just slightly behind these two teams, and improving and looking to maybe really go for it next season. And the manager knows everything about his squad, and he looks exactly who he wants to bring in, because he hasn't really bought anyone. And I'm just trying to think, Chiesa's more of a squad player. They brought a goalkeeper from Valencia, that's more for next season. So it's still last season's team. I still think Liverpool are the third best team. But going back to these two, I just still always when I look at the squads and I just look at that attack Manchester City have got, and De Bruyne doesn't play today. I know Odegaard doesn't play, to be fair, as well, but I just think they've got a little bit more in those attacking areas, and I just think they've got a little bit more. And if Arsenal would have held on, it would have been a set-piece goal. And we know they're amazing at set-pieces. We saw it last week. They win the game at Tottenham. But you can't win the game on set-pieces every week. Sometimes it's got to, the quality of your players or the finish. And I just think Manchester City have the edge there.
It is just worth mentioning the reason we were watching the second half like that was because of the sending off just before half-time, which obviously completely changed the dynamic of that second half, which is disappointing because we wanted to see the game 11v11. We didn't want to see Rodri go off either. But I think that, Arsenal will make the point, I'm sure, around the Doku, kicking the ball away. They're absolutely right to. I think we made it at the time. I think Michael Oliver had as difficult a first half as he will have for a long time, because he's, quite simply the number one referee that we have. But it was a tough game out there for him in that first half. You could feel the heat coming upon him. But I did think that the sending off was a sending off, just based upon the fact that at the start of the season, again, I'm not quite sure why they've toughened up on this rule. I sometimes think they create a problem for themselves, that the PGMOL, or it is the is it IFAB, the referee's body, when they create. I'm not sure there was a big problem with kicking the ball away, because of the fact now that we can add time on. If you kick the ball away for 20 seconds, I mean, I'm not saying that if it's ridiculous to kicking it away, which I don't know what you think about it. Now this almost like zero tolerance towards kicking the ball away, even if it's not nudged away a little bit.
It's delaying the restart. It's not just kicking the ball away. It's actually delaying it.
But what I'm saying to you, were you getting sort of like wound up about delaying restarts last season? Obviously, it wasn't something that was like really bugging me as a sort of commentator on a football match. So they've almost in some stamped down on this, and Arsenal have obviously found that this season even Declan Rice in the second half got booked for it. So it's something that's not going to go away, I think, as an issue. But Trossard was silly. I mean, his first one's a straight yellow card, the pull back, and then he knows once he kicks it away. So, I mean, just worth mentioning that, I think. You thought it was a red card, did you, Trossard?
Yeah, it's daft. He's pulled someone's shirt back. Listen, that can happen in a game of this magnitude. You're worried about someone getting away from you. But once you're on a yellow card, I think it was one of them that you say they've stamped down. It's probably one of them in the past where you think the whistle's only just gone, I can get away with it. I think Trossard knew what he was doing, but he thought the whistle has only just gone maybe a second before, I can get away with this one. But the way he kicked it away as well, I mean, it's still going. You know what I mean? He just put his foot right through it. So, it was daft.
And that regulation or change in interpretation has now cost Arsenal 4 points in the Premier League. The game against Brighton and here today. I mean, listen, that's a facile interpretation. The game might have played out differently, who knows? But on the face of it, they have led 2 games, had a player sent off, and conceded an equaliser.
Was there any City player right next to Trossard that even if he'd just almost gone to kick it and missed it and left it there, that City would have had to have still gone and sort of fetched the ball? I don't think it was, because sometimes you can just leave the ball and actually it's still sort of, if you like, buy you a bit of time to get back in. But anyway, I can't remember if it was a City player near you.
No, but I don't. It was always one of them that, because it was so close to.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Yeah, we're here all morning and we've got lots to give you, including a paper review coming up, looking at the morning papers today with journalist and author Janelle Aldred and reporter at The Spectator, Cindy Yu. That's coming up next.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited.
I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her.
Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Time now to take another look at the morning papers. Here with me today are journalist and author Janelle Aldred and Spectator reporter Cindy Yu. So welcome back to both of you. And in the last hour, we reflected on the fact that a number of the front pages have the story of Israel's latest attacks on Lebanon, including one that they say targeted Hezbollah's headquarters in Beirut. And this is the article inside the Mail that picks up on that.
Yes, absolutely. And the Mail goes a bit further, saying that the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has been killed, but they're quoting this from the Israeli officials. They've got a quote here that Nasrallah would need a miracle to survive. This is not what Hezbollah is saying. Hezbollah is saying that he's in a safe place, so I think in the next 24 hours we're going to find out more about whether or not this primary target really was killed, because this was a massive attack and there will have been a lot of collateral. If he wasn't even killed, then there will raise massive questions over whether or not this was worth it in terms of the civilian damage on Beirut. And it just basically goes to show that a ceasefire is nowhere in sight, despite the efforts of the US, UK and France.
That's right. And just at the UN, just over 24 hours ago, there was a feeling of some optimism among those parties that a ceasefire might be agreed. That feels like a very long time ago.
I feel like we've had a few of these false dawns in the past few months where America or the UK or the UN will announce we're close, and it's almost immediately as they announce it, one of the groups, be it Hamas, be it Hezbollah, be it, Israel, someone will then say or do something that lets us know that actually we're very, very far away.
Exactly. And the big question is what happens next and what kind of retaliation might there be from Hezbollah
Iran, yeah.
and what might Iran say? So lots of questions on that story and something we're keeping a very close eye on here. In the meantime, though, Cindy, take us to the front page of the Daily Mail, because a rather extraordinary front page there. This is from Boris Johnson's memoirs.
I'm just going to read out the headline. Boris's dramatic plan for military raid on Holland to snatch back our vaccines. It's an incredible story, because Boris Johnson has his memoir out. He's, as we know, a brilliant writer in terms of how engaging and comical he is. And one of the anecdotes he is telling is that during the height of the COVID pandemic, he actually considered sending in British military forces to go claim back British-owned vaccines from a warehouse in Holland that the EU was refusing to let go of. And he was talked down very easily, and he admits that it sounds nuts, in quotation, but it's just a classic Boris story. The kind of thing that gets us talking about him, the kind of thing that's eye-catching, but you have to take it with a massive pinch of salt. And how serious is he really being, or how much is he being joking around in that situation room back then? There are some other really interesting revelations as well about how close he was to death, saying that the birthday party that got him in trouble was not a birthday party at all. There was no cake in sight. Boris is back.
Absolutely, and also all inside the inside pages as well, if anyone is interested to check that out. In the meantime, though, take us, Janelle, to the Times, because the row over Labour freebies continues, certainly on their pages.
So from one politician who took too many freebies to the next lot, and I think this is why this is still a story. When we think about the birthday party, when we think about Boris and the gold wallpaper and all of those things, the opposition were absolutely and rightly taking him to account on it, taking the Conservative government to account where they were taking things. And I think now what's happened is it seems that Labour seem to be surprised that people are surprised and still talking about it. But I think they're not really taking into account the mood of the nation. So when we look at this list, what we're seeing is some of the people with the most power in the cabinet. So we're talking about the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, NHS, Leader of the House, Education. They've all taken upwards of £40,000 worth of freebies. Now, the average wage in the UK is £35,000. And so when they're surprised, I think what they need to take into consideration is you're getting free stuff, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times the amount of the average salary in the UK. And in a moment when we are talking about cutting, when we are talking about hard decisions, when we're talking about putting up fees, when we're talking about no winter fuel, you have to understand that for a lot of people, this feels just like a bit of a slap in the face, because you told us you were not like Boris and his lot, you were not like Rishi Sunak, you were not like the previous, that you were going to be different, you were going to bring these standards in. And I think they're not quite understanding that for a lot of people that feels like a rowback.
And they might say, we've done nothing wrong, we haven't broken any rules, we've declared all of this, we have high-profile jobs that require looking smart, and a lot of the public might sympathise with that. But do you think they've read the room wrong?
Absolutely. I mean, the responses have dragged this out so much more, I think. Initially saying, we've done nothing wrong, and then actually saying, the Conservative government would have taken more, but they just didn't have to declare it. And so it's almost as if two wrongs make a right. Bridget Phillipson specifically said, when asked about the Taylor Swift tickets that she took, that they were hard to turn down. Well, I'm sure that is true. But, that is not exactly what you go into politics, and it's not exactly, edifying for you. And then there's a real question over, the influence of particular donors. Just away from the freebies that are corporate freebies, particular donors, people like Lord Wahid Ali, what is he buying for the amount of money that he is giving the Labour Party? It's just unclear, whenever any political party is so in hock to one or two donors, how independent their policy making might be, how much the hotline is to the top members of government to say, well, maybe something that would be good for my interests. This is a legitimate criticism that people levied at the Conservative government, and it is legitimate now.
Well, and interesting, that does take us on, doesn't it, to the next story inside the Eye, where there's clearly some irritation at the amount of hostile briefings that are going out to the press about the government.
Yes, I mean, it just seems like there is very little that is actually different between the government that we started this year with and the government that we have now, in the sense that the last years of the Tory government were we were obsessed about their corruption, their cronyism, but also the infighting. And actually the infighting for the Labour government has already started, and they're only 2 months in power. Angela Rayner reportedly is annoyed at the reporting that she's been sidelined by the government. This seems to be at an advisor level, so different advisors kind of batting for their camps and negatively briefing against Angela Rayner's camp. But Angela Rayner has now briefed that she is annoyed about all of this. So it is just, if this is what it's going to be like in the first 2 months, I'd be very interested to see what it's going to be like in the next year and how quickly it takes to descend to Tory levels of infighting.
Are you surprised by how many negative stories there have been about a new government, which you normally talk about having a honeymoon period? They've just had their first conference where they've been in power for 15 years or something, and it should be a time of celebration, yet there are these stories that are coming out. Who do you blame for that? Is it them being naive and making mistakes, or is it a hostile press?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think some of the press is quite hostile, especially the papers. There's more right-leaning papers than left, so I think there's a kind of, aha, you see, you thought you were going to be better, but actually you're not. So I think there is some of that. However, people can't leak what's not happening. So in a sense, that there must be some...
Well, they can.
Well, they can. Well, they can. But, you know, there's a sense of there must be some infighting, or else there would be nothing to say. So when Angela Rayner says, well, I don't care about Manchester. Well, obviously you do, because you're talking about it. so clearly, on some level, it is bothering you. But I am surprised that it's so quickly... It seems that ego has taken over. And so where's the public service element in all of this? Because for me, I think when we're all rowing together to solve this £22 billion deficit that we've got, the fact that already people are rowing or boring holes in their own rowboat is quite surprising to me, because I would think they would have a bit more discipline to be together for the first few months.
And also bear in mind the Tories don't even have a leader.
Yeah.
The Conservative Party is nowhere to be seen right now. Because
they can't do much damage at the moment.
And yet all
they're doing it to themselves. They're doing it to themselves,
because actually Freebie-gate, we're talking about this, is without an opposition criticising them. So what's going to happen when the Tories actually get a leader?
Yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Take us on quickly as well to that £22 billion black hole. One of the ways of trying to fill it and get some money to spend was this tax on non-doms. That policy, is that looking intact?
So it's not looking... Well, it's looking intact from Rachel Reeves' point of view, but there's been another leak, and this leak has come from within Whitehall, because apparently people feel that she's not listening to their advice, and their advice is that what they're saying is they've basically copied the Tories' non-dom policy, and what they're saying is there were some basic errors in that we shouldn't be repeating. And so a leak has come, someone might say righteously, to see if it can cause them to course correct. But one of the main things they seem to be talking about is the length of time that when they're imposing taxes on non-doms. So at the moment it's 11 years, and they're trying to move that down to 4, which was something from the Tories. But what they're saying is it's 5 years until you can permanently, you know, get your residency here, to stay here. So if you do it at 4 years, people might not be incentivised to stay. By the time you've got your residency, we're talking 11 years down, you're happy to pay the taxes. So I think that's one of the things they're saying. It's a basic error. We should correct this and look at it more closely. But what I will say is the non-dom story, since Rishi Sunak is no longer PM and there's not a wife of a high-ranking politician as a non-dom, I would say the non-dom stories have actually been quite quiet for a long time. So it's actually interesting to hear this leak on this story, which has become a bit of a fringe issue.
Make it a little bit more volume from here on in. We're out of time again, but you'll be back in the next hour. Thanks both.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. Coming up on the programme today, a blitz on Beirut as the IDF targets Hezbollah's leader.
And another big day in the Premier League for Manchester City and Pep Guardiola, but can they extend their lead?
It's Saturday, the 28th of September. After a major hit on Hezbollah headquarters in Beirut, Israel unleashes a wave of strikes across Lebanon overnight. The fate of Hassan Nasrallah, the group's leader and Israel's intended target, remains unclear. At least 44 people are killed in Hurricane Helene as it barrels across 4 US states. We report from a devastated Florida coast.
When I'm with her, I'm reminded of the virtues of the English.
But isn't she American?
Exactly.
Legend of British stage and screen, Dame Maggie Smith dies aged 89. We reflect on her most memorable moments. And a very important mission for the Royal Navy sees several turtles returned home.
And in sport, Lucy Bronze scores a stunning first goal for Chelsea in the WSL as they thrash newly promoted Crystal Palace 7-0.
Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us here today. Israel is continuing to strike targets in Lebanon after a blitz on Hezbollah's headquarters. The fate of the group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, remains unclear. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cut short his visit to New York to return to Israel. Well, in the early hours of this morning, more strikes on Beirut. Israel's military say their strikes are on strategic terror targets belonging to Hezbollah, including weapons production facilities and key command centres. Well, in a moment, we'll get more on Hassan Nasrallah, Israel's intended target. But first, our international correspondent John Sparks reports on the attack on Hezbollah's headquarters.
If there was a lingering suggestion of a ceasefire in Lebanon, it was destroyed in a series of deafening explosions in Beirut. The Israeli Defense Force deploying overwhelming firepower in the city's southern suburbs. Clouds of smoke and dust saturating the sky. The target was Hezbollah's Central Command headquarters. Israel said it was embedded under residential buildings in a district called Dahia. The result, in the words of a Lebanese minister, was complete decimation. The destruction of 4 to 6 apartment blocks. And in images broadcast from the scene, we see slabs of concrete and gaping craters, and local residents searching for friends and loved ones in the dark. The number of casualties is expected to be high. It is one of the most densely populated parts of Beirut.
We are 100 meters, maybe less, from the blast site. We've seen ambulances screaming up and down this road, heavy machinery as well, big diggers going in to move the rubble. And we have seen pictures of twisted metal, rubble, the product of large Israeli munitions, 2,000-pound bunker-busting bombs.
This is the 5th attack on this suburb in the past week, with Israeli media claiming that Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was the target. Lebanese sources later reported he was unharmed, although Hezbollah itself has said nothing. Israel has defended its operation.
After almost a year of Israel warning the world and telling them that Hezbollah must be stopped, Israel is doing what every sovereign state in the world would do if they had a terror organization that seeks their destruction on their border, taking the necessary action to protect our people so that Israeli families can leave their homes safely and securely.
At the UN General Assembly, The sight of Israel's Prime Minister was too much for some, yet he brought his own supporters to hear a defiant set piece. The campaign against Hezbollah would continue.
Israel's soldiers have fought back with incredible courage and with heroic sacrifice. And I have another message for this assembly and for the world outside this hall. We are winning.
Netanyahu made no mention of negotiation. Israel's wars in Gaza and Lebanon will continue.
We will fight until we achieve victory, total victory. There is no substitute for it. Israel must also defeat Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Shortly after he finished speaking, the strikes began, his office releasing this picture of the Prime Minister authorizing the attack. These blasts have unnerved the city. They are the biggest since the conflict began. And with the fate of Hezbollah's leader unknown, fear builds throughout the region. John Sparks, Sky News, Beirut.
So who is Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah's elusive leader and Israel's reported target? Well, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah became leader of the Shia militant group Hezbollah in 1992, aged just 32, after his predecessor was assassinated in an Israeli helicopter strike. Nasrallah has not been seen in public for years over assassination attempt fears. Instead, he's mostly seen in staged, managed live streams to his followers. With the support of Iran, he has transformed Hezbollah into the most powerful paramilitary group in the Middle East and a leading political force in Lebanon. Under Nasrallah's leadership, Hezbollah has helped train Hamas fighters as well as militias in Iraq and Yemen. He's also been able to secure missiles and rockets from Iran for use against Israel. Well, let's cross now live to Tel Aviv. We can speak to our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes. Morning to you, Deborah. So Israel says that it's targeted Hezbollah's headquarters in its latest strikes, although it's not clear what Hassan Nasrallah's status is as at present. What impact, though, do you think these latest attacks will have had on Hezbollah as a group?
I mean, the Israeli military, since the beginning of last week when they launched, well, it's not been publicly avowed, but those exploding pagers and walkie-talkies that were targeting members of Hezbollah in a very unconventional form of warfare was then followed up by the biggest round of airstrikes since the 2006 Lebanon war, and it really does reveal the extent of the intelligence that Israel has managed to gather on Hezbollah, which points to serious infiltration of the group, the fact that they have been able to pinpoint senior commanders in their strikes and also the locations of weapon sites. The hit last night with huge force. It seems the biggest airstrike that's been carried out so far. Reportedly, as you were saying, targeting Hassan Nasrallah really does underline the confidence that the Israeli military must have had in the information that they were receiving in order to carry out a strike that they will have known would have crossed many red lines, not just for Hezbollah, but also for its chief backer, Iran, and they wouldn't have taken that risk without a certain degree of confidence in the target that they were hitting. So it's going to be very, very key to hear what Hezbollah says officially about the strike and the fate of its leader. And in terms of the impact, whether or not Nasrallah has been killed or injured, clearly Hezbollah at the moment is a group that is in huge disarray following over a week now of punishing strikes. Yet it is the largest paramilitary group in the region. It does have a deep arsenal of weapons. It does have the ability to inflict serious harm upon Israel should it decide to go all in with its weaponry, something that hasn't happened yet. And Israel has been calculating that neither Hezbollah nor Iran want to have a direct war with Israel, but as these red lines are crossed, so too does the potential for that to happen. And just to give you a sense of what the Israeli operations as they continue into today, the Israeli military have just released a statement about 20 minutes or so ago, saying that their air force have for the previous 2 hours been conducting what they describe as extensive strikes across Lebanon against dozens of Hezbollah targets. The military has also just announced the mobilisation of 3 reserve battalions, which is smaller than a brigade, but to bolster the defences in central Israel, which is an interesting development and maybe points to a concern that places like this city, Tel Aviv, might increasingly become a target if Hezbollah and Iran decide to ramp up their responses to Israel's offensives.
OK, well, Deborah, we appreciate that. Thanks very much indeed. Well, in the meantime, our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, has got the latest on the ground in Beirut.
Well, it was a very rocky night for everyone in Beirut, but not just Beirut, not just the capital. Huge strikes, massive strikes down in Tyre, where we'd just come from a few hours earlier. Lots of buildings being hit down there, including a hotel where a lot of the foreign media were staying. But the streets of Beirut this morning are packed with people who have fled Dahia, one of the main sites of the attacks, which kept on going until very early morning today. I mean, you can see people have been sleeping on pavements, in their cars. We've spoken to this particular family who came all the way on their truck. They were only about, I would say, a couple of kilometres from Dahia. There's a family of 40 grandchildren, children, a lot of children who came, 31 children or so who came on that truck. We've been speaking to all the way down this front. The Corniche is basically packed with displaced people. I think the implications of what's happened overnight are going to be reverberating throughout Lebanon for days, weeks. We're talking about a man who is the absolute head of Hezbollah, the strongest, most powerful non-state fighting actor in the region, aside from Iran. The economy minister, the Lebanese economy minister, has told Sky News he thinks all red lines have been crossed, that this is a full-blown war, full-blown attack on Lebanon by the Israelis.
Alex Crawford reporting there. Now, here, tuition fees could be going up in plans to help struggling universities, although students aren't being forgotten either. So this is first reported in the Times newspaper, this suggestion that tuition fees could be going up. Certainly universities have been calling for higher tuition fees. They say they've been struggling with their budgets. But the suggestion is that there could be grants to help students manage their finances better as well. But let's find out whether or not anything's been confirmed. Our political correspondent, Rob Powell, joins us now. So, Rob, tell us more about what we know about this story.
Yeah, this is a story, Anna, in the Times newspaper this morning. It's not been confirmed by the government, but it's certainly not being denied either. It's essentially suggesting that there are plans being drawn up in government to put the limit for tuition fees, which essentially is what most universities charge, up from just over £9,000 where it is now, rising over the course of 5 years to around £10,500. So that would equate to about a 13.5% rise over those 5 years. Now, the reason is because the tuition fee limit isn't pegged to inflation, so it doesn't go up with prices, which means that when you've had this period of rapidly rising prices post-pandemic, universities have found themselves severely squeezed. They also are fearful about migration limits for students to bring over family members and the impact that might have, because the international students aren't subject to the cap, meaning that they're quite a good cash flow for universities. As I say, the government haven't confirmed this, but Bridget Phillipson did suggest that she was concerned about the effect of inflation. There's also suggestions in the paper they might have to bring back maintenance grants if they are going to put fees up.
OK, interesting one to watch. Anyway, Rob, thanks very much indeed. Oh, I'm going to ask you something else, actually. I was going to ask you about Boris Johnson. Now I've got you. His memoir's being published in the Mail today, and some extraordinary stories he's telling.
Yeah, who could forget this story, Anna? Boris Johnson's memoir in the Mail, where he is essentially suggesting that in the thick of the pandemic, when there was a scramble going on to get vaccine doses into the country, he went to military chiefs and essentially asked them to draw up a plan for basically a raid on a manufacturing plant in the Netherlands that made AstraZeneca jabs. He believed that they were being stolen from the UK by the Netherlands. So he talked to the Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff, who said that it was feasible to send a team over the channel into the Netherlands on a rigid inflatable boat up the canals before seizing the vaccine doses and taking them out of the country via the Channel Tunnel on a lorry. But the Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff, according to Boris Johnson anyway, also probably not unreasonably pointed out that if they were to be caught by the Netherlands, then they would essentially be seen to be invading a long-standing and close NATO ally. And because of that, Boris Johnson decided that this probably wasn't the best idea. Look, I think this is Boris Johnson firmly back into journalist mode. We saw sort of colourful stories like this when he was a journalist before he became a politician. They are usually interesting, always entertaining, but you do sometimes question how truthful they are.
Well, yeah, as you say, how could I have forgotten that story? I really will let you go now, Rob, though. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Now, at least 44 people have died across 4 states as Hurricane Helene caused devastation across the southeastern US. The Category 4 storm has left regions flooded, thousands stranded, and millions of houses without power. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner has this report.
In the seaside town of Cedar Key, they don't know how much more of this they can take. Helene was the 3rd hurricane to strike here in just over a year. First came Idalia, then Debbie, and now this, the worst yet.
It's like losing a family member, it really is.
Stoney's liquor store is strewn across the street.
It tore down shelving, it tore down concrete walls, got in here and destroyed everything, and just a total loss.
Keegan works in the shop.
We've rode out many hurricanes here in the past 13 months. So, I mean, we are no strangers to catastrophe. I doubt that some of the owners will rebuild.
Winds of 140 miles per hour ripped through here, but it was the 10-foot storm surge that did the damage. Homes, restaurants, businesses all swallowed. Residents haven't yet been allowed to return to Cedar Key. When they do get here, this is what they'll find. It must have been utterly terrifying for those who didn't evacuate as a wall of water came towards them. The heft of Helene is most striking. Treasure Island is hundreds of miles from the point of impact. But look at this. 5 people have died in this area, at least 2 drowned. And almost 5 million people across 5 states are without power. Helene's impact extending far beyond Florida. Georgia isn't usually affected by hurricanes. This is different. In parts of North Carolina, officials are calling this the worst natural disaster of a lifetime, and a warning from the state's governor.
Flooding will continue through the weekend in some areas, and may even occur in areas that don't typically flood. With the rain that they had already been experiencing before Helene's arrival, this is one of the worst storms in modern history for parts of western North Carolina.
The path of destruction continued into Tennessee. Staff and patients were evacuated to the roof of this hospital, engulfed by floodwater. Helene may have been downgraded on the hurricane scale, but numbers don't tell the story here. This is historic flooding. It's widespread and it's not over yet. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Cedar Key, Florida.
Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, we'll be taking a look back at the remarkable career of the acting legend, the late Dame Maggie Smith. And also ahead, we're going to be taking another look at the papers with journalist and author Janelle Aldred and reporter at The Spectator, Cindy Yu.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited.
I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Now, Austria's far-right Freedom Party could win a national election for the first time when the country votes on Sunday, tomorrow. The party have tapped into voters' anxieties about immigration, Ukraine and other concerns following recent gains for the hard right elsewhere in Europe. Well, let's get more on this. I'm joined now by Financial Times correspondent Sam Jones. Good morning to you, Sam. Good to talk to you. So, all eyes on the Freedom Party at this election.
Yes, I mean, it's a potentially historic breakthrough. They might come first for the first time since they were founded, or since actually Austria's history in the post-war period. So it will be quite a moment. I mean, it's important to stress that this is a multi-party democracy, and that although first place is a big move for the Freedom Party, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to end up in the government. There might be months of coalition talks afterwards. So it's still kind of up in the air as to whether they might actually be in power. But yeah, it's quite a moment. And it's also a big deal because the Freedom Party, it has a long history, but it has moved more right. And even as it has moved more right, it's picked up votes. So that's quite significant.
And what is it about this party that seems to be resonating with the public? Is it about its migration policy?
Migration is really at the core of the Freedom Party's appeal, and it has been for a long time. But it's not just that. Under its current leader, a man called Herbert Kickl, it's embraced a whole load of other kind of positions which have been very successful for it. I mean, one of the main ones is about the pandemic. The pandemic has really featured at the very forefront of their campaign over the summer. There are posters everywhere, inviting people to never forget the restrictions that were put on them during the pandemic. And some of your viewers might remember that, Austria was kind of unusual in that they even proposed mandatory vaccinations at one point. The Freedom Party has really been pushing that message hard, that it was the only party to oppose all of these measures. And it's picked up new voters as a result of that, particularly among the young.
And it's not the only country in Europe to see a rise in popularity of the hard right. What does that mean for the future? What does it mean for the EU? What does it mean for a sense of unity in policy towards Ukraine, for example? What are the implications?
Well, Ukraine, I think, is the key issue here for the Freedom Party and for Austria, because they are virulently anti-Ukraine. They want peace with Russia. They believe that the policy towards supporting Ukraine has fatally undermined the prosperity of Europe. And that's something that they would push very hard if they came into government. On other issues like the EU, they're much more emollient. They're kind of okay with being in the EU. They don't have any particular animus against Brussels, although it does feature occasionally in their literature. So in that regard, they're a bit different from some other far-right movements. But yeah, Ukraine, that's the key issue for them, I think, in foreign policy terms. And Austria is a small country, so it's not like it would be a radical change. But the Freedom Party is very interconnected with a lot of the other right-wing parties around Europe. They're very close to Orban in neighbouring Hungary. They're close to the Slovaks, the Czechs, obviously, so they're kind of coming to power. Their rise is interesting, as you say, as part of this kind of picture of the far right moving across Europe, because alone, it wouldn't mean very much, but together with all of these other countries kind of tilting rightward, it really does. And even if they don't get into power, it will force the political mainstream to suddenly start considering some of their positions and perhaps even adopting them. And we've already seen that in Austria with immigration, where the kind of mainstream, the centre-right Conservative Party, they have a lot to fear from the Freedom Party stealing their voters, and so they have adopted a lot of the Freedom Party's positions. If that happens on Ukraine, then that could be a real moment.
OK, well, Sam Jones, fascinating stuff and a really interesting election to watch. Thanks very much indeed for your time. We do appreciate it. Now, don't say we don't give you variety on this show. We're going from the Austrian elections to turtles. And it's an obvious link. Clearly, there might be one somewhere, but I'm not sure if I can find it. Anyway, Amelia's here to explain what this story is about.
Yeah, this is a lovely story for the weekend, and it's to do with the Navy doing something that they maybe wouldn't normally get involved in, a little bit of environmental, a bit of animal rescuing, if you like. So HMS Medway is a patrol ship in the Navy, and it has taken 6 rare loggerhead turtles after they were swept onto UK shores back to the Azores, back into their natural habitat. So this is a great story. It's absolutely lovely. They were swept from the Caribbean or the east coast of the USA, and you can see one of them up there. That is part of the rescuing.
Swimming already?
Yes, he's practising. It's a bit of practice, but it's believed that if they weren't picked up and rescued and found, they might have died because of the state that they were found in. And we've got some names for a few of them. So 4 of the turtles, they were called Jason, Perrin, Gordon and Hale. They were found in Cornwall. And then we had Holly in Devon and Tony in Anglesey. And they were cared for by Newquay's Blue Reef Aquarium and Anglesey Sea Zoo. So how nice. I mean, look at them. They're sort of being put into their little crates. That one is pretty anxious to get going, I would say, looking at it.
And I love the fact that there's an expression, wasn't there, for when they hit the cold seas around Cornwall. They were
cold stunned.
Cold stunned.
I don't know about you both, but I would be cold stunned if I went for a dip.
Yeah, that's like when you go surfing and you get, what is it, ice cream head.
Yeah, exactly.
Ice cream head?
Yeah.
Do you mean brain freeze?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I knew what she meant. Maybe it's because we're dressed like ice creams that's why that particularly cut through with me.
I'm pretty sure it's called ice cream head. Anyway, maybe just in our house, but yeah.
I like the names. I love the fact that they've named Perrin after Perranporth, Hale was found at Hale and Gordon was found in Bude. I mean, I'm not quite sure what the link is there, but anyway, I love the fact that they've done a variety of names. Some of them based on where
that was
found.
a nice mission.
Yeah,
that was a really nice
could
mission.
you call it sort of turtle repatriation? I don't know if that's right, but yeah, a bit of variety, I suppose, for the Navy.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really nice story.
We had tortoise issues in our house yesterday. Chomper's got some problems with his shell. He scuffed it. When he goes upside down, he's not very good at righting himself. He's a weak
like
tortoise.
An upturned sort of turtle, as it were.
So they're just like that, and he can be there for ages if you don't find him. Flip him back over.
No.
But they don't make any noise, do they? So you just have to spot him.
No, they don't make any noise, but they actually do make noise.
Oh.
But not when they do that.
Go on, distant noise.
Yeah, what do they sound like, Jackie?
No, I don't want to.
Are you sure?
Sort of squeaking, like a trapped rat or something.
Yeah. Maybe for the next hour we can persuade her to give us a flavour of that.
No, we don't want to hear the noise. When he makes the noise, you don't want to hear the noise. Anyway, it's shell issues. It's been a big drama in our house. Very similar.
My morning was very uneventful compared to
I know.
that.
I feel like I'm missing out.
You can borrow Chomper anytime you like.
I'd love to.
Yeah,
great.
you can.
Anyway, away from tortoise squeaking, sport.
Yes, that was another really flowing link there, Anna Jones.
I'll get my coat.
It's going to be a busy weekend of sport, and it's quite nice because we've been sort of waiting for ages for sort of a good rivalry in the Premier League, the way they used to have, you know, Wenger against Fergie, and they really didn't like each other. And it's not like that, but, you know, Pep and Arteta, because the teams are getting closer, it's getting more, well, people are creating a rivalry. It's quite fun. Anyway, the battle between Manchester City and Arsenal rumbles on. Hear from both managers next. Also, Chelsea hit 7 goals past Crystal Palace, with England international Lucy Bronze scoring a stunning first strike for the club. And in cricket, England showed their firepower with bat and ball as they levelled the one-day international series with a 186-run thrashing of Australia in a rain-shortened match at Lord's.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Now, King Charles has led tributes to Dame Maggie Smith, who's died at the age of 89. Her Downton Abbey and Harry Potter co-stars have also taken to social media to pay their respects to the acting legend. Our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, reports.
Those withering put-downs.
I'm so looking forward to seeing your mother again. When I'm with her, I'm reminded of the virtues of the English.
But isn't she American?
Exactly.
Pier totum locomotor.
That spellbinding talent.
Man the boundaries, protect us, do your duty.
While to younger generations, she'll be remembered for starring in two of the biggest shows on the big and small screens.
I've always wanted to use that spell.
Dame Maggie Smith, one of our finest talents, honed her skills in a lifetime on stage and screen.
You know, Maggie Smith, rather like the Queen of England, you know, has been a part of my life ever since I was a student in London, and she was an icon even then. So she's someone I've watched and admired and loved. Eventually, I had the great honour of working with her. So it's a very sad day for the whole culture of theatre and cinema in England. It's a very sad day.
Growing up in Oxford, it was her English teacher who'd encouraged her to act. Her natural gift quickly stood out on stage, securing her parts like Hedda Gabler and Desdemona opposite the late Laurence Olivier, who'd spotted her talent early on.
Morning, girls. Good morning. Morning, Cindy.
Her mum only abandoned the idea of her daughter being a secretary when Smith won an Oscar for the prime of Miss Jean Brodie in 1969.
If scandal is to your taste, Miss Mackay, I shall give you a feast. Miss Brodie, I am a teacher. I am a teacher first, last, always. Do you imagine that for one instant I will let that be taken from me without a fight?
This win wasn't a one-off.
The winner is Maggie Smith in California Suite.
Almost a decade later, she picked up another for California Suite, while successfully maintaining her parallel film and stage careers.
I just really can't believe it.
I always knew we could rely on you.
Some of her best-known movies included Tea with Mussolini and playing a dame in Gosford Park.
Dame Maggie Smith for services to drama.
Over a decade after she was made a dame in real life.
You phoned me when it happened to me, and you said it doesn't make any difference, you can still swear. Do you remember?
You can swear more.
You can swear more, yeah. Just try and do it privately. No, I won't do it now.
While her box office smashes included Sister Act,
excuse me,
and Hook.
Peter, don't you know who you are?
She'd known nothing on the scale of this.
Now, today we will be transforming animals into water goblets.
Already a household name, she won over a new generation of fans playing Professor Minerva McGonagall in the Harry Potter movies. Finding the attention, she confessed, a bit much. And then, of course, this.
Yeah, how'd you find Downton on your return?
Much the same, really. Probably too much the same, but then I don't want to cast a pall over all the happiness.
How could you ever do that?
Her gift for acid-tongued comedy seemingly made for Violet Crawley, the Dowager Countess of Grantham in Downton Abbey, watched around the world, but not by Dame Maggie herself.
Have you ever watched Downton? No.
I've got the box set.
Downton and Potter, two modern cultural landmarks of the big and small screen.
Her great gift as an actress was that she could make you cry your eyes out one minute and then laugh like a drain the next without turning into someone different. She could synthesize the character to have all these different aspects. And she was a joy to write for.
In a career spanning 7 decades, Dame Maggie Smith was one of the most versatile, accomplished and beloved actresses of her generation. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
And just reading through the tributes, there's just so much love and respect for her, just in terms of, you know, her range, that she was so funny. She did comic roles brilliantly, but also, you know, those serious roles. She just had the most extraordinary versatility.
When you're watching her in Downton Abbey, I always marvel at the fact that I'm like, she's an older lady, just absolutely rocking it. And the lines that she had just stole the whole show, didn't they? Scenes.
And so much work later in life, which is so great to see.
So replying to Isabel Crawley, taking her observations as a compliment, I must have said it wrong. Replying to Sir Richard saying, he said, I doubt we'll meet again. Do you promise? I have plenty of friends I don't like. On love and marriage, I know several couples who are perfectly happy, haven't spoken in years.
Just brilliant.
I know, I think we should just be all more a bit Maggie.
Bit more Maggie.
Bit more Maggie.
Mistress of the withering put down.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And speaking of dark arts, well, we weren't actually, but, you know, obviously she was, you know, huge in Harry Potter, and that's now how all our kids would really know her. Dark arts has been two words that have been used a lot this week about Arsenal and the way they, you know, ran down the clock a little bit in their match against Manchester City last weekend with that, you know, that draw, which was so dramatic. And there's been lots of toing and froing on that, and it seems like Arsenal have got a little bit under Manchester City's skin, and Arteta in his press conference said, well, you know, I was there for 4 years, I know what goes on there, sort of thing. And Pep was like, well, what do you know? And it was just, yesterday's press conferences were quite intriguing. Let's have a look.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
I backed Arsenal at the start of the season because I just felt as though when a team's hunting you down, eventually they get there. More often than not when they're getting closer and closer. And Arsenal, I thought today felt like a monumental, defining moment in this journey that Arsenal are on of trying to get to a league title. You know, 2 seasons ago, they quite simply fell apart in the last 10 games. Last season, they go so close, and then you think, right, OK, they're learning, they're maturing. And some of their play, by the way, in the second half, not just the defensive play, but you know, you think of sometimes you used to admire the old Italian teams or the old sort of, if you like, teams in Europe that would be able to get through and waste time and do things that frustrated you, the life out of you, but because they were so experienced. So they demonstrated that in the second half and just didn't get over the line. So, look, you know, it's nothing to do with wanting Manchester City to not win the title or Arsenal to win the title. It's, in fact, we're effectively neutral with these two teams. But you just think today and tonight, where will we be in April and May with this game? Will we be talking about going back to that final minute and what happened with the John Stones? Or will we be thinking that City win the title by 1 point and that moment determines it? It's ridiculous because there'll be drop points and there'll be mistakes and there'll be lots of victories before the end of the season. But it is that type of situation when you're up against Pep Guardiola. He makes you feel that way.
And there are other teams, Jamie. You're allowed to mention Liverpool, who were top this morning. How are you feeling about the title race?
Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit similar to last season, where Liverpool are just slightly behind these two teams, and you know, improving and looking to maybe really go for it next season. And you know, the manager knows everything about his squad, and he looks exactly who he wants to bring in because he hasn't really bought anyone. I'm just trying to think. Chiesa's more of a squad player. They brought a goalkeeper from Valencia. That's more for next season. So it's still last season's team. I still think Liverpool are the third best team. But going back to these two, I just still always when I look at the squads and I just look at that attack Manchester City have got, and you know, De Bruyne doesn't play today. I know Odegaard doesn't play, to be fair, as well. But I just think they've got a little bit more in those attacking areas, and you know, I just think they've got a little bit more. And if Arsenal would have held on, it would have been a set-piece goal. And we know they're amazing at set-pieces. We saw it last week. They win the game at Tottenham. But you can't win the game on set-pieces every week. You know, sometimes it's got to, you know, the quality of your players or the finish. And I just think Manchester City have the edge there.
It is just worth mentioning the reason we were watching the second half like that was because of the sending off just before half-time, which obviously completely changed the dynamic of that second half, which is disappointing because we wanted to see the game 11v11. We didn't want to see Rodri go off either. But I think that, Arsenal will make the point, I'm sure, around the Doku, you know, kicking the ball away. They're absolutely right to. I think we made it at the time. I think Michael Oliver had as difficult a first half as he will have for a long time because he's, you know, quite simply the number one referee that we have. But it was a tough game out there for him in that first half. You could feel the heat coming upon him. But I did think that the sending off was a sending off just based upon the fact that at the start of the season, again, I'm not quite sure why they've toughened up on this rule. I sometimes think they create a problem for themselves, like the PGMOL or is the sort of, is it IFAB, the referee's body, when they create. I'm not sure there was a big problem with kicking the ball away, because of the fact now that we can add time on. If you kick the ball away for 20 seconds, I mean, I'm not saying that if it's ridiculous to kicking it away, which, you know, I don't know what you think about it. It was now this almost like sort of like zero tolerance towards kicking the ball away, even if it's not nudged away a little bit.
It's delaying the restart. It's not just kicking the ball away. It's actually delaying it.
But what I'm saying to you, were you getting sort of like wound up about delaying restarts last season? Obviously, it wasn't something that was like really bugging me as a sort of commentator on a football match. So they've almost in some stamped down on this, and Arsenal have obviously found that this season, even Declan Rice in the second half got booked for it. So it's something that's not going to go away, I think, as an issue. But Trossard was silly. I mean, his first one's a straight yellow card, the pull back, and then he knows once he kicks it away. So, I mean, just worth mentioning that, I think. You thought it was a red card, did you, Trossard?
Yeah, it's daft. He's pulled someone's shirt back. Listen, that can happen in a game of this magnitude. You're worried about someone getting away from you. But once you're on a yellow card, I think it was one of them that... You say they've stamped down. It's probably one of them in the past where you think the whistle's only just gone, I can get away with it. I think Trossard knew what he was doing, but he thought the whistle has only just gone maybe a second before, I can get away with this one. But the way he kicked it away as well, I mean, it's still going. You know what I mean? He just put his foot right through it. So, you know, it was daft.
And that regulation or change in interpretation has now cost Arsenal 4 points in the Premier League. The game against Brighton and here today. I mean, listen, that's a facile interpretation. The game might have played out differently, who knows? But on the face of it, they have led 2 games, had a player sent off, and conceded an equaliser.
Was there any City player right next to Trossard that even if he'd just almost gone to kick it and missed it and left it there, that City would have had to have still gone and sort of fetched the ball? I don't think it was, because sometimes you can just leave the ball and actually it's still sort of, if you like, buy you a bit of time to get back in. But anyway, yeah, just... I can't remember if it was a City player near you.
No, but I don't. It was always one of them that, because it was so close to half time, it was always going to go in the box. It wasn't like City were trying to and he was going to be out. He wasn't even out of position. It wasn't.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, we'll be discussing the stories making the newspapers today with journalist and author Janelle Aldred and reporter at The Spectator, Cindy Yu.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited. I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Let's take a look now at the morning papers once again. I'm joined by journalist and author Janelle Aldred and Spectator reporter Cindy Yu. So welcome back to both of you. I think nearly every one of the front pages of the papers has a picture of Dame Maggie Smith, understandably, after the very sad news that we had yesterday that she died. And you've picked out, Janelle, a double-page spread inside the Daily Mail paying tribute to her.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of her family members told her, her mother actually told her, you won't be an actress with a face like that. How encouraging. But obviously she proved her very wrong with an over 70-year career. And I think everyone will have their own Dame Maggie Smith favourite character. Famous for Harry Potter, but for me, two of the things I loved her in the most was Downton Abbey, which I thought she was just brilliant in Downton Abbey, and also in Sister Acts. She was a great, comedic actress, a great serious actress. There wasn't a role that you saw her in that you were like, well, that wasn't a very good movie. She elevated every project that she was in, and I think that's why we all kind of love her, because she's truly a national treasure that you can actually be really proud of, and a great export. And one of the quotes that she said, she doesn't suffer fools, and fools don't suffer her, because she's quite spiky. And it was said that she liked to play roles that were quite close to her character, like the Dowager in Downton Abbey. She wasn't really acting in that. and it was brilliant. And the favourite quote from that was one she said, I don't insult people, I describe them accurately. I'm going to take that away as kind of my mantra. But I think she was just one of those people that she just lit up the screens that she was genuinely on. I feel like, in a weird kind of way, we don't know that much about her, in a sense that you know her as the different characters that she played, but when you saw her, like in the Dames episode she did with Judi Dench and the other Dame, it's still just so funny and just so much fun. And I think in this times where so much is like doom and gloomy, someone like that just kind of lifted the screens and just makes you forget about the world for a minute.
So true. She didn't seem to really enter into that kind of whole razzmatazz showbiz side of things, did she? She let her roles speak for themselves.
She was just steady, she was reliable, and she was just kind of always there, which is, I think, why this is so shocking. I came to her through Harry Potter, firstly, but Downton Abbey I also loved. But it's just kind of using this chance to learn about her, how long she's been active for, and not just being an actress, but how successful an actress she has been despite her mother's low expectations.
And early on, the prime of Miss Jean Brodie obviously was absolutely superb, and a very serious role in many ways. Anyway, let's move on, and those tributes to Dame Maggie, I'm sure, will keep coming in through today as well. Now, Cindy, there's a story inside the Mirror that took your interest now about these, what we're learning about the Titan submersible.
Yes, the Titan submersible, which killed all of the people on board, having gone missing for a few days, including the CEO of the company, OceanGate. And it has now come in the inquiry that actually this particular CEO, Stockton Rush, had actually said that he failed to register it in the US to avoid stricter regulations. And there's a quote here saying, if the Coast Guard became a problem, then he would buy himself a congressman and make it go away, is what his plan was. Doesn't really bode well for the safety of the sub, and, tragedy hit.
Well, that's right, and obviously he can't answer for himself and hit back at those allegations. But we are getting some really interesting evidence in this inquiry, and it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. Let's turn, Janelle, though, to the Express now, and this is rather a worrying story, as you can tell by the headline.
Yeah, and a few of the papers carrying it, not in a massive way, but it's in a few other places, and stalking victims actually being failed by the police. And it says that the Susie Lamplugh Trust, on behalf of the National Stalking Consortium, said they highlighted instances where crimes were not properly identified or where officers trivialised stalking behaviour. And I think this is the thing in this social media age, if everyone's probably, well, many people have seen Baby Reindeer and kind of seen how that stalking took place. In a digital world, stalking isn't just someone walking up outside your house and, like, peeping through your window. Now people can have access to you 24/7 via emails. And in some instances, they're saying stalkers are free to kill because cops fail victims. That's an unquoted thing. And that's because actually there was a Gracie Spinks and she was stabbed to death by her stalker in 2021, and that was reported to Derbyshire police. And I think, you know, as women, we hear a lot about women's safety. And we hear a lot about things like rape convictions not going through and different things. And stalking is another thing that we can add to that thing, where a lot of women are not having the confidence they need to come forward because they feel like even if they do, nothing substantial is going to happen. So I think the IPC are right to highlight this. And they're actually saying around 1 in 20 people are likely to have been stalked by a partner or an ex-partner, and 1 in 50 by a family member. So if we're feeling like the police isn't the place to turn, where can people who are being stalked, where else is there for them to go? And it must leave you feeling completely vulnerable if when you pick up the phone, someone's kind of like, are they outside now? Are they being violent? It's not just about violence, it's about the invasion of your entire life and all of your privacy. So I think it's quite right that they're looking.
We're more exposed to that now that everyone has the ability to be contacted. Let's very quickly just reflect on Donald Trump's meeting with Keir Starmer. This is picked up in the Times.
Yeah, so Keir Starmer's actually managed to meet the former President Donald Trump before he's met Kamala Harris, which is really interesting. And this is clearly, you know, Starmer's way of saying, I am just going to be the Prime Minister of this country. I'm going to talk to characters that previously, you know, I had to be very negative about. Characters that are very controversial and savoury to some on the left. And so Trump also was playing very nice, saying that Keir Starmer was very nice and very popular. I would have loved to be a fly on the wall in that room.
Absolutely, we all would have been like to be a fly on the wall for that. We are out of time, but it's been so good having your company this morning. Thanks both very much indeed.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello, a very good morning. It's 9 o'clock. Coming up on the programme today, a blitz on Beirut as the IDF targets Hezbollah's leader.
And another big day in the Premier League for Manchester City and Pep Guardiola, but can they extend their lead?
It's Saturday, the 28th of September. After a major hit on Hezbollah headquarters in Beirut, Israel unleashes a wave of strikes across Lebanon overnight. The fate of Hassan Nasrallah, the group's leader and Israel's intended target, remains unclear. At least 44 people are killed in Hurricane Helene as it barrels across 4 US states. We report from a devastated Florida coast. And a very important mission for the Royal Navy sees several turtles returned home.
In sports, Lucy Bronze scores a stunning first goal for Chelsea in the WSL as they thrash newly promoted Crystal Palace 7-0.
Hello, very good morning. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. And we start with breaking news this morning. We're going to cross live to our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, who's in Tel Aviv for us this morning. So, Deborah, get us up to date with the latest that's happening.
Well, the Israel Defense Forces, the Israeli military, on their official Twitter account, have just released a tweet saying that Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, will no longer be able to terrorise the world. Now, we're waiting for more words from the Israeli military and also, of course, from Hezbollah itself. But this comes after that huge strike yesterday in Beirut, targeting Hassan Nasrallah. In the aftermath of that, there were claims that he had survived, but there had notably been no comment from Hezbollah itself, no word either from Nasrallah himself. And now this message on the Israel Defense Forces Twitter account, their official IDF X account, saying that Hassan Nasrallah will no longer be able to terrorise the world. Now, if that is confirmed to mean that he has been killed in this strike, then that would be an enormous development, a significant development, a game-changing development.
Well, indeed. And Deborah, as you say, this comes after strikes by the Israelis on targets in Beirut, both last night and overnight. Last night, they said that they were targeting the headquarters of Hezbollah, and it was believed that, indeed, the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, was their target. We have since had more strikes overnight in other areas of Beirut and Lebanon, and we will get more details on the effects of that as well later. But, Deborah, just how significant would it be if Israel has indeed taken out the leader of Hezbollah?
It's impossible to overstate the significance of this. It is a huge moment. Hassan Nasrallah has been an arch foe of Israel for many decades, and since this escalated offensive by Israel against that group, there has been questions about whether or not they would try to take out the leader. Clearly, his name is synonymous with Hezbollah, and he has been the leader of the group for more than 30 years. So the elimination of him, as Israel would say, would deal a catastrophic blow to that organisation and also to Iran, the chief backer of Hezbollah. The Iranians now will be left with a huge decision about how to respond to such an act. Up until this moment, they've been restrained in blow upon blow that Israel has dealt upon Hezbollah and other allies to Iran, including Hamas. And yet the killing of Hassan Nasrallah would be a moment like no other in this conflict, and clearly Iran would need to respond. How it chooses to do that would be clearly what we don't know, but Israel will be hoping that its allies, were that to happen, would step in to help defend it.
And Deborah, just to let you know that we have just had a statement from the IDF, and let me just read this to our audience now. They have said in the last few moments, the IDF eliminated the so-called Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the terrorist organisation Hezbollah. IDF statement goes on. Yesterday, the IDF killed Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the terrorist organisation Hezbollah and one of its founders. The IDF also killed Ali Karaki, the commander of the Southern Front in the terrorist organisation Hezbollah, and a number of other Hezbollah leaders. Air Force planes with precise intelligence guidance from the Security Establishment's intelligence agency, they say, raided Hezbollah's central headquarters located underground under a residential building in the southern suburb area. The raid was carried out while the leadership of the War of God was inside the headquarters and was coordinating terrorist activities against the citizens of Israel. And just to continue with this statement from the IDF, they go on to say, during his 32 years as leader of the terrorist organisation Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah was responsible for the killing of a large number of Israeli citizens and IDF soldiers, in addition to planning and executing thousands of terrorist acts against the state of Israel and around the world. And the IDF say that Nasrallah was the main decision-maker in the organisation and had a sole and final say on every strategic decision Hezbollah made, and sometimes on tactical decisions as well. Just to continue, it's a fairly long statement, but we are near the end now. IDF says on October the 8th, the terrorist organisation Hezbollah and its leader Hassan Nasrallah joined the war against the state of Israel. Since then, Hezbollah has continued its attacks against the citizens of Israel and dragged the state of Lebanon and the region into escalation. The IDF will continue to target anyone who promotes and engages in terrorist acts and the citizens of the state of Israel. So that is the IDF's statement in the last few minutes, Deborah, where they say they have eliminated, as they put it, the so-called Hassan Nasrallah, leader of Hezbollah.
Yes, and we await a comment from Hezbollah itself, but this happens exactly a week after Hassan Nasrallah himself appeared in a video responding to those catastrophic pager and walkie-talkie explosive attacks that Israel launched covertly against that organisation that really preempted the past 10 days of this unprecedented escalation against Hezbollah, leading to his then elimination, according to the Israeli military. I could just say that the chief of the general staff, so the head of Israel's military, has also just released a statement in relation to this, and he says that after the elimination, in his words, of Nasrallah, quote, "This is not the end of our toolbox. The message is simple. Anyone who threatens the citizens of Israel, we will know how to reach them." This is a country that almost a year on now, exactly, from the October the 7th atrocities unleashed by Hamas, another Iranian-backed militant group that wants the destruction of Israel as its goal, launched its attack into Israel. Almost exactly a year later, here we are with the Israeli military having unleashed this deadly strike against Hezbollah and targeting its chief, its leader, and now declaring that Hassan Nasrallah is dead. It's an absolutely extraordinary, unprecedented turn of events, and the region will be holding its breath for what happens next.
Indeed, and we'll explore those possibilities in a moment, Deborah. But let's just remind our viewers who Hassan Nasrallah is. Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah became leader of the Shia militant group Hezbollah in 1992, aged just 32, after his predecessor was assassinated in an Israeli helicopter strike. Nasrallah has not been seen in public for years over assassination attempt fears. Instead, he was mostly seen in stage-managed live streams to his followers. With the support of Iran, he's transformed Hezbollah into the most powerful paramilitary group in the Middle East and a leading political force in Lebanon. Under Nasrallah's leadership, Hezbollah has helped train Hamas fighters as well as militias in Iraq and Yemen. He's also been able to secure missiles and rockets from Iran for use against Israel. And Deborah, you were just saying that the big question now is what happens next. I mean, what kind of response would you expect from Hezbollah and from Iran, of course?
I mean, the organisation right now will be in absolute disarray. They've just lost, if it's confirmed by Hezbollah, which has been notably silent on the fate of its leader ever since that strike yesterday evening. So you would imagine that they would not want to launch an immediate retaliation, instead mourn the loss of their leader and then work out what to do next. It's interesting maybe to think about a comparison to when the Americans, when Donald Trump was president, launched that assassination, that killing of Qasem Soleimani, the leader of the Iranian Quds Force, the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Force. He was an arch enemy of the United States. He was blamed for leading Iranian-backed militias launching strikes against American forces in Iraq, also in Syria. They took him out in a drone attack in Baghdad a few years ago, and that was another moment of maximum peril for the region in how Iran would respond and whether they would want to go directly to war with America. And at that time, the Iranian response, it took a few days. It was not immediate. They had that time of mourning, of remembering him before they launched ballistic missile strikes against American forces in Iraq. But that was it was a restrained response that didn't result in American deaths, which seemed to have been maybe deliberately calculated to prevent escalation into all-out war. This is a very different, a completely different scenario, but we are still talking about the killing of a figurehead, of a leader, of the biggest paramilitary group in the region, and his death, it's far more significant in that sense, and how the response comes, you would imagine, will be far more, far bigger, far greater. But I wouldn't imagine it would be immediate. Instead, you would think that would be maybe at least a few days to collect thoughts and work out how best to respond. And also it's important to note that Israel has, throughout this escalation, and this is not something that's just been dreamt up overnight. This has been an operation that has been in the planning for a long time in terms of the way that Israel has conducted itself over the last few days, with clearly deliberately planned strikes, taking out systematically senior commanders in Hezbollah, leading right up to the leader. And it happened at a time when Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, was in New York, maybe, as it's been reported, as a diversion, maybe to make Hezbollah kind of breathe a sigh of relief, its leader breathe a sigh of relief that the Israeli Prime Minister was away. Maybe they could relax a little bit and be caught off guard like that. I mean, that's just me speculating. But in terms of the Israeli response, the Israeli actions and the calculations that would have underpinned how Israel, which has seemed exceedingly confident in the way that it has been conducting this escalating offensive against Hezbollah, it seems to be counting on the belief that a coalition that rounded around Israel to protect it from Iran back in April will be by Israel's side this time, given that Israel has now acted to take out the leader of an organisation that in the US and in the UK, Hezbollah, its military wing, is regarded as a terrorist organisation. Its group has launched strikes against American, British interests as well. So there certainly won't be mourning of his death in those capitals, and Israel will be hoping that there will be a coalition that will unite around Israel to defend it from whatever retaliation will be coming.
OK, Deborah, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. So let's get more on this breaking news that Israel's military is saying that the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah has been killed in an airstrike on Beirut. The IDF has put out a statement just in the last few minutes in which they say the IDF announces that yesterday, September the 27th, 2024, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the Hezbollah terrorist organisation and one of its founders, was eliminated by the IDF, together with Ali Karki, the commander of Hezbollah's southern front, and additional Hezbollah commanders. Following precise intelligence from the IDF and Israeli security establishment, IAF fighter jets conducted a targeted strike on the central headquarters of the Hezbollah terrorist organisation, which was located underground, embedded under a residential building in the area of Dahieh in Beirut. The strike was conducted while Hezbollah's senior chain of command were operating from the headquarters and advancing terrorist activities against the citizens of the State of Israel. So that statement in the last few minutes from Israel's defence forces. Well, let's cross live now to our international correspondent, John Sparks. So, John, no word yet from Hezbollah themselves?
Sorry, Anna, if you could repeat the question, please.
I was wondering if there'd been any word from Hezbollah yet.
Yeah, nothing. No, absolutely nothing from Hezbollah. I think the fact that the Israelis have come out with this, I mean, they have a good track record when they are confirming their targets in this sort of situation. Their intelligence likely to be very good. But we have heard absolutely nothing from Hezbollah so far. We also have seen very little reaction on the streets here in Beirut. We were very close to the bomb site last night, about 100 metres away. We weren't allowed to go any closer to that. All we could see were ambulances going in and out, heavy diggers, big heavy machinery going in, obviously to clear the rubble, that sort of thing. Water trucks to douse down the dust. Clearly, they were beginning a process of sifting through the rubble. I am assuming that there was very little information available at the time. I think that for members of Hezbollah, this will be very difficult to take in, very difficult to process. If it is confirmed by Hezbollah, then I would expect to see significant anger on the streets in Beirut. I think important to say, however, that in a way, Hassan Nasrallah predicted his own death. You know, he made a speech after the death of a commander called Fuad Shakur at the end of July, where he said that assassinations are par for the course for leaders in Hezbollah. It happens. And there's a reason that he was saying that. That is because a lot of people, a lot of members of Hezbollah, they lose their children in the war, in the fighting with Israel. So in a way, he was saying that to console other people who were losing members of their family, but it also stands for him. Assassinations are par for the course. You know, he replaced a former leader who was assassinated. His predecessor, Abbas al-Musawi, he'd only been in the job as the leader of Hezbollah for a year. He then came in 1992. He has survived multiple assassination attempts, but he knew that he was living on borrowed time. He knew that he was a target for assassination, and it does seem now that the Israelis have done exactly that.
And stand by, John, because I'm going to bring in Alistair Bunkle, who's joining us live from Haifa. Alistair, good morning to you. Let us know what you make of this breaking news.
Well, I heard some of what John had to say, so apologies if I repeat any of it, but I thought it was quite notable that we didn't hear much from Hezbollah overnight. You had a very quick statement from Hezbollah officials minutes after the strike yesterday saying that Nasrallah was safe, and then pretty much complete silence. There were reports last night that none of Hezbollah's central leadership was contactable. And there were a few other things as well that seemed to be significant to me. The Iranian Supreme Leader calling an emergency meeting of the Iranian Security Council, summoning them to his home, his compound on the outskirts of Tehran. And the IDF, when I spoke to them late last night, they weren't going to commit one way or the other, but privately they felt that they had got their target, they'd got their man, and it now transpires, according to the evidence, the intelligence they've managed to be able to gather, that they believe they have. Now, we are yet, as John said, to hear from Hezbollah themselves, but the Israelis will have done what they call BDA, which is battle damage assessment, and you do that in many different ways. I mean, that could be surveillance flights overhead over the target area. That could be human intelligence, which I suspect has played a part in this, as it has done in previous attacks over recent days. It could be signals intelligence. All manner of things have clearly led the IDF to be sure that they have got Hassan Nasrallah. And I must say, even though we haven't heard from Hezbollah, the IDF is unequivocal in its statement.
And Alistair, to what extent will Israel be bracing for some kind of response from Hezbollah?
There's already been a fairly big response this morning. Okay, I don't think on the scale that we might possibly expect, but there's been a lot of sirens around this part of northern Israel over the course of the morning, covering huge swathes of the region. No injuries, no major damage from what we gather. Most of the missiles sent by Hezbollah have been intercepted. But I think now Hezbollah, but in particularly Iran, their wealthy backers, are at a crossroads. What to do next? Do they avenge the death of Nasrallah with an all-out onslaught on Israel? Do they go for broke, if you like, and use that massive arsenal of missiles that we understand they have? Or do they change course entirely? It is a difficult position for Iran. They haven't entirely seen eye to eye with Nasrallah over recent weeks, but he wasn't just a key figure in their largest proxy group. He was close to the Supreme Leader as well. He was trusted in the advice that he gave. He had shaped Hezbollah in his very image since he took over in 1992. Just another word on that in a second. And so Iran could decide that Israel has had such a successful couple of weeks. Israel has such momentum behind them. It might be better on this occasion, pull back, lick your wounds, and save this proxy to rebuild and fight another day. And just going back to what I said about when Nasrallah took over in 1992, that was the assassination of the previous Hezbollah leader, al-Masawi. And one, it shows that groups like Hezbollah can regenerate pretty rapidly. Leaders can be replaced, as Ali Larijani, the senior Iranian figure, hinted at last night. But secondly, from an Israeli perspective, don't always assume that if you kill the leader in place right now, it's going to be replaced by someone better. Often, as was the case when Nasrallah replaced al-Masawi, it is replaced by someone more dedicated to the cause, more committed, in this case, to the elimination of Israel.
OK, Alistair, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. So let's get more on this breaking news that Israel's military is saying that the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, has been killed in a strike on Beirut. Just a reminder of the statement that the IDF has put out in the last few minutes. They have said the IDF announces that yesterday, September the 27th, 2024, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the Hezbollah terrorist organisation and one of its founders, was eliminated by the IDF. together with Ali Karki, the commander of Hezbollah's southern front, and additional Hezbollah commanders. They go on to say, following precise intelligence from the IDF and Israeli security establishment, IAF fighter jets conducted a targeted strike on the central headquarters of the Hezbollah terrorist organisation, which was located underground, embedded under a residential building in the area of Dahieh in Beirut. The strike was conducted while Hezbollah's senior chain of command were operating from the headquarters and advancing terrorist activities against the citizens of the State of Israel. Well, let's cross live now to our special correspondent who is in Beirut on the outskirts of Dahieh where that strike took place. So, Alex, your reaction to this breaking news?
I mean, this has long been suspected overnight when we didn't hear any particular confirmation or denial of Hassan Nasrallah's death, and the longer it went on, the more it seemed that this was a possible likelihood. The Hezbollah group appears to be in some disarray. There was a huge amount of tension last night and overnight from amongst Hezbollah supporters, loyalists. The area of Dahieh is known to be a big stronghold of the militant group. It does have offices there. There are clearly a lot of loyalist supporters, and their top command appears to meet there regularly, as we've seen from the targeted assassinations over the past few weeks or so. But it is also a densely, very heavily populated residential area with a big Christian group that live there, and it's usually very, very populated. It's packed full of families and civilians, as well as those who are part of the Hezbollah high command. We're actually just on the edge of Dahieh, the area going into where the site has, the area where the bombing took place is being very tightly controlled by the Hezbollah group right now. So it's very hard to get anywhere close there, although one of the Sky producers is there and talks about how it feels like it's a ghost town, that area. It's emptied of people. There are still a lot of emergency workers, as you probably saw just a few moments ago, who are moving around the city. We're seeing a very large group of people who have been displaced from Dahieh or from nearby, because the bombing went on through the night and in the early hours of the morning. They're sleeping on pavements, they're sleeping on the beaches, whole families have been packed into the back of trucks, on motorbikes, walking. And many of them are Syrian refugees who are being displaced in previous wars. One mother I spoke to with 3 children had been in Lebanon trying to seek sanctuary for 11 years. She moved twice overnight with her children to try and reach safety. So the city is weirdly on red alert, if you like. The Lebanese economy minister told Yalda Hakim overnight how he felt that this was an all-out war on Lebanon. We're hearing of airstrikes much further south in Tyre, where we came from last night, as well as Mount Lebanon, which is about 60 kilometres away from north of the southern front line, and where a lot of displaced people had run to from the previous few days. So there is very definitely a feeling, despite what the Israeli forces are saying, that they are targeting specific Hezbollah military infrastructure, political infrastructure, leadership and command centres. There is very much a feeling of fear in the capital city and way beyond that. The Lebanese people as a whole are also, if not the intention, they are definitely feeling under attack. Hezbollah military and political command, Hassan Nasrallah holds a very special status within the militant group. He is revered as a founder. He's been leader for more than 3 decades. We've been to a number of their rallies, their funerals, listened to his speeches. He himself has made it very clear through his speeches and in his rallies that everyone is replaceable, including himself. He made it clear, and has made it clear many times before, that no one was indispensable. However, actually taking out the head of this militant group will have reverberations, not just in Lebanon. It'll be seen massively amongst the militant group as a huge provocation, a raising of the temperature to a height that they obviously did not realise or feel was possible just a few days ago. And it will have reverberations further afield in Iran. Iran being Hezbollah's biggest backer. It's stood by Hezbollah over many decades. It's helped fund and support them financially, militarily, everything. So the idea that you take out one of Iran's top conduits, its top allies, and the head of the group, which they saw as the buffer between Israel and Iran, is going to have serious consequences, I think, which will go on for many days, weeks, much longer than that. I think on the ground here, today is going to be a very, very uncertain, anxious time, probably for weeks to come. We've been seeing that airplanes have been leaving. The Middle East Airlines is still operating. They have put on more flights. We understand from the Civil Aviation Authority here that they have received specific warnings from what they believe to be an Israeli warning, an Israeli message warning them about certain planes that are coming in. The Israeli forces have made clear to them and to the Lebanese authorities that if they believe that any plane is flying in with supply weapons or anything that could be suggested or perceived as a military backup, then they will be seen as a target. And that will, again, send really anxious chills through not just the Lebanese political hierarchy, not just the Hezbollah infrastructure and the military and political group that is very powerful here, but also to all the civilians, many of whom are now running away from their homes. We've seen displacement just in the capital over the last couple of days, never mind across the whole of the country, where tens of thousands have upped and been forced out of their homes.
Yeah.
Information from them as present. And clearly questions for Hezbollah, the group, in the days ahead, but also, as you say, potential reverberations further afield. All eyes now on Iran and its next move.
Yeah, I think what happens next will be absolutely pivotal, and I think the Hezbollah group will be expecting and certainly hoping that they will get some sort of support from their very powerful Iranian backers. Iran has stood solidly by them. They helped create them. They have been very thick, strong allies over 3 decades, and Hezbollah has grown as a result, initially from this support, both financially, intelligence-wise, weapons-wise, everything-wise, with the help of Iran. But now Hezbollah, by itself, has grown into a very, very powerful force. It's more powerful than the Lebanese army. It's boasted in the past, Hassan Nasrallah, of having more than 100,000 fighters. So we don't know that for certain, but there is very definitely, do not underestimate the amount of support it's got. Even if it hasn't got actual fighters, it does have a large body of loyalists and supporters who are fanatical. Now, I have to emphasise before we let you go that there is a lot of a big group of people. I was speaking to some of them overnight, not just MPs, but also a large group of the population who are very anti-Hezbollah. Not all of the population of Lebanon is pro-Hezbollah. That is very definitely not the case. And that's why the Israeli Prime Minister's speech yesterday to the UN was seen so negatively here because he seemed to insinuate, his words were, you know, in every house, in every kitchen, in every garage in Lebanon, there is a Hezbollah rocket or missile, and that is patently not true. And many of the Lebanese people here are seeing that as an incitement or a green light to Israeli forces to bomb anyone who's in Lebanon.
Hello and welcome to this live and continuous coverage of the breaking news from Beirut. I'm Yalda Hakim, and in the last half hour, the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, have announced that Hassan Nasrallah, the longtime leader of Hezbollah, was killed in the series of airstrikes on southern Beirut last night. We're reporting last night that a number of buildings were targeted in what was the largest strike here on the capital in the last week. And we have received confirmation in the last half hour that Hassan Nasrallah, the 64-year-old leader of Hezbollah, has been killed alongside one of his top commanders, Ali Karaki. Now, let's just show you that statement from the IDF, which has come out in the last few minutes. They've said that the IDF announces that yesterday, September the 27th, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the Hezbollah terrorist organization and one of its founders, was eliminated by the IDF, together, as I was saying, with Ali Karaki, the commander of Hezbollah's southern front, and additional Hezbollah commanders, following precise intelligence from the IDF and Israeli security establishment. The fighter jets conducted a targeted strike on the central headquarters of the Hezbollah terrorist organization, which was located underground, embedded under a residential building in the area of Dahia in Beirut. And as we've been reporting, this is an area that has long been considered a Hezbollah stronghold. But as the IDF warned last night, and again in the statement, they believe that these headquarters were deeply embedded under residential areas. We don't have any more information about the death toll from that area, but it was a densely populated area, and confirmation from the IDF in the last half hour that Hassan Nasrallah, the longtime leader of Hezbollah, was killed in that strike. Let's bring in our John Sparks, who's with me now and was in Dahia last night. It was incredibly tense then, wasn't it, John? When you were out there, they were asking the press to leave, they asked you to leave. They were on high alert. There was an announcement from sources close to Hezbollah saying he's fine, he's safe, but there was speculation overnight that he'd been killed.
That's right, Yalda. There were media reports quoting Hezbollah sources saying that Hassan Nasrallah was unharmed. That appears to not be the case. Where we were, about 100 meters from part of the bomb site, we could see ambulances going in and out. There was heavy machinery, big diggers going in. It was pitch black. It was dark. Clearly, Hezbollah were making an assessment about the damage, starting to sift through the concrete, starting to sift through the rubble, and so were the Israelis. So was the Israeli military. They have a good track record on this when it comes to looking at or carrying out assessments of the actions that they have taken. They clearly believe they have compelling intelligence suggesting that Hassan Nasrallah was killed in their strike. What we know, according to the IDF, is that there was a complex, they called it the Central Command Center, underneath four residential buildings. They used what we believe were 2,000-pound bunker-busting bombs to get in there. Again, really important to say, this has not been confirmed by Hezbollah. The reaction from Hezbollah, and I think from its supporters, from its members, will be very interesting today. I think it will fill the whole gamut of emotions here: anger, shock, distress. Also important to say that Hezbollah is not Lebanon. Lebanon is not Hezbollah. There will be a range of emotions. I think people who are not supporters of Hezbollah will not be celebrating this. They will be worried what happens next. What are the implications for this? What will Hezbollah do in response to the killing, the alleged, well, what we think is the killing of Hassan Nasrallah? It is a very unstable moment.
It's a tense, a dangerous moment. And we're talking about tens of thousands of heavily armed men who are angry and leaderless at this point. I mean, while, you know, we hear from groups, Islamist groups, militant groups like Hezbollah, they often talk about preparing themselves for martyrdom. This is why they go into this line of work. He has been the leader of Hezbollah since 1992, when his predecessor was assassinated. And for the longest time, he himself has been living underground to avoid an assassination. But he knew this moment was going to come, and it was imminent.
He did. This is a very important point. In fact, in a speech that he made just after the death of a senior commander at the end of July this year, Fouad Shakar, he said assassinations for senior Hezbollah leaders are par for the course. Essentially, he was predicting his own death. He replaced somebody who was assassinated, the previous leader, who was only around for a year when he was killed by the Israelis. He lived his life essentially in secret. He lived it underground. He recorded his speeches. He recorded his sermons. They were then played to his followers later in public buildings, often in the southern suburbs of Beirut. I went and saw some of them myself. He lived a secret life. We don't think that he has made a public appearance, in fact, since 2011. Barely gave any interviews. He clearly was doing his very best to stay alive, doing his best to remain the leader of this movement. But he knew it was possible, perhaps even likely, that this moment would come.
Yeah, indeed, John. I'm going to keep you there and go straight to our Alex Crawford, who has been witnessing the families who have been fleeing that area in southern Beirut. Alex, last night the IDF issued a statement asking people in southern Beirut, in those neighborhoods, to get out of the way for their own safety. I mean, the statements were, that statement was issued, and then within perhaps an hour or so, people were fleeing for their lives, and the bombardment continued. Just tell us where you are and what you're seeing.
We're on the edge of Dahir, which is the southern suburb of Beirut. It's known to be a Hezbollah stronghold. There's no doubt it has got a lot of support and loyalists who live there, but it's also a very densely populated area, which is home to many other people who are not Hezbollah, including a large Christian community and many others who are just not staunch supporters or involved at all in any of the Hezbollah military activity. We're actually on the edge of one of those neighbourhoods which got the alert from the Israeli forces overnight to evacuate. There were 3 neighbourhoods of Dahir following the first big explosion. A couple of hours later, 3 other neighbourhoods were told to evacuate. We're behind, just on the edge of one of them. It doesn't appear to have been hit. There is a drone, an Israeli drone, flying overhead as I'm talking to you. There is a great deal of fear and uncertainty on the streets. There's a lot of civil defence and Lebanese ambulance crews on standby in and around the city. There's Lebanese army position points who are going round the city. The Lebanese army is dwarfed in power by the Hezbollah militant group. They definitely hold all the power. Certainly in Beirut, they control very strongly control parts of Dahir. We have got one of our Sky producers who's managed to get inside Dahir. She tells us that it is an absolute ghost town. She's looking at huge scene of devastation. She's reported that one of the hospitals that we went to overnight, where some of the wounded were taken to, it is a Hezbollah-controlled hospital. The doctors and the nurses there have been told to evacuate. It's not clear exactly who's told them to evacuate, whether it's Hezbollah officials or they've received an alert from the Israeli forces to evacuate. And there are lots and lots of families that we're seeing, not just camped out along Beirut's Corniche, along the seafront, sitting in their cars, having slept in them all night, on the beaches themselves, a big crowd of them on the main public beach, sitting with their suitcases, or sometimes, in one case I saw a family and the only thing they picked up was their little girl's toy. That was literally all they had, a little cuddly toy in her arms. Very, very worried, talking about moving several times during the night. They were all families. There were some groups of men. Obviously, men are part of families as well. They were saying that they were civilians, a lot of them feeling that there was nowhere safe. Many of them said there is nowhere safe now in Beirut. Certainly, Yalda, as you were talking to the economy minister, the Lebanese economy minister overnight, he was echoing the same sort of sentiment that they felt Lebanon as a whole was feeling under attack. The whole of the country, and we know that there have been massive, multiple airstrikes down south in the southern city of Tyre as well as Mount Lebanon. So right now, Beirut, the capital, feels like it's a city under siege, and everyone is waiting, not just to worried about the Hezbollah response, but also almost anticipating further Israeli action.
Alex, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. It feels like a tale of two cities right now. Those who are not in those southern suburbs staying at home, terrified about what may come, and those who have been left homeless overnight after those warnings for them to leave their homes. We saw those images of people fleeing the southern suburbs of Beirut, and as you say, not everyone there is a Hezbollah supporter. They are families, women, children, the elderly, leaving with the clothes on their backs in the middle of the night. That statement was issued by the IDF at about midnight, when many people were already asleep, and they were being asked to leave their homes and go to some form of safety and shelter. We're talking about tens of thousands of people. We saw traffic in the streets. We saw people gathering in parks, trying to find some form of safety and trying to figure out what to do next. Many people have slept out in the open overnight after being left homeless following the aerial bombardment of the area, those southern suburbs of Beirut, following the IDF announcement that they would continue their bombardment after they struck the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, who they confirmed in the last hour or so that they did actually kill in that strike. Let's speak now to Hannah Weisfeld, who's the founder and director of Yashad, who works to raise support for resolution of conflict, respecting rights of Palestinians and Israelis. Thank you, Hannah, for joining us here on the program. It's been a tense year, but frankly, this past week, it has felt like it has escalated on a whole new level, that this conflict, which was on some levels confined to Gaza, and of course we're seeing the rocket attacks into Israel and the bombardment back into southern Lebanon, but it has now taken a very dark turn.
Yeah, it's very hard really to understand where things will go now. And I think that the key thing, as your correspondent said, is to see what happens now with Iran, because they have been thoroughly undermined with the killing of Hania in July in their capital, with the killing of Nasrallah, who's one of their key entities in the region. And I think really all eyes need to be watching Tehran to see what they do next. Without a ceasefire in Gaza and with continued bombardment of Lebanon, it seems almost impossible how this could possibly now de-escalate.
Yeah, as you say, a very difficult moment for the residents here. And, the thing is that for this entire year, perhaps for decades, Hezbollah has tied its war with Israel with the situation affecting the Palestinians. It will be difficult to know now, leaderless, what Hezbollah is going to actually do next. This thing could escalate, or they could actually just wait, regroup, and see where they're going to go next. Because this idea that a group like this can be eliminated is also something that is unlikely.
Well, I think that's an important point, which is that we've seen Israel fight a war in Gaza for the last 12 months under the kind of banner of dismantling Hamas. And actually that has been completely unsuccessful. Hamas is still operating in Gaza. We've seen mass civilian casualties. The hostages have not been returned. And up until now, there was this sense that you could prevent an outbreak of regional war and war in the north with Hezbollah if there was a ceasefire in Gaza. Now, the ceasefire in Gaza looks, like it's not coming anytime soon, if at all. And now that Nasrallah has been killed, it seems hard to imagine that even if there were to be a ceasefire in Gaza, that Hezbollah and indeed Iran are going to agree to kind of put down their arms over Gaza, because I think fundamentally they're operating independently of Hamas, and so the idea that there could be deconfliction by ending the war in Gaza, I think, seems really unlikely now.
It will be, as you say, crucial to see what Iran will do next, because while they have been severely undermined over the course of the last few months, they have also been strangely muted about this situation since last Tuesday, when the pager explosions took place and then the walkie-talkies exploded and then top commanders were struck and killed. We haven't really heard the kind of response, other than using the UN General Assembly as a platform, but the Iranians talked a lot about wanting peace in the region, not wanting to escalate. No doubt this will surprise and shock many Hezbollah fighters as well.
Yeah, and I think that what Iran has done over the past week and what it now does is different. One of their top assets in the region has just been killed. And so whether or not they continue with a slightly more, in inverted commas, peaceful rhetoric, I think remains to be seen. But I think fundamentally the issue here is that we're seeing a situation in which violence is effectively being used under the guise of, trying to create peace and stability. And until this war ends, and it ends in the south in Gaza and it ends in the north with Hezbollah, and until there is actually not just an end to the war, but serious steps for a political resolution between Israel and the Palestinians, it seems very hard to see how the region is going to continue to operate, because it certainly cannot go back to October the 6th. Every doctrine, so to speak, has been smashed. The idea that this conflict can be contained in the borders of Israel, the idea that the Palestinian-Israeli issue can be contained through continued occupation, and indeed that the conflict can remain within the region. And we've seen so much subtle diplomacy from the international community that, we cannot go back to a situation when this war ends, that we end up on October the 6th with everybody trying to contain the conflict, because we've seen that is fundamentally not possible.
Indeed, very much so. Hannah, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
Well, we've been getting... Thank you. We've been getting some statements coming in from the IDF. They've been speaking at a press briefing, and they've said that Hassan Nasrallah terrorized Israel for decades and was one of the world's most influential terrorists. So they continue to issue statements, hold conferences around the death of Hassan Nasrallah. For Israel, this is a crucial moment. And we saw last week with the pager explosions, the walkie-talkies, top commanders who were part of Hassan Nasrallah's inner circle being targeted, many questions being asked about what their strategy was and how far that they were willing to go. And we saw overnight a densely populated area in southern Beirut where Israel struck what they said were a number of buildings which they believed were Hezbollah Central Command, and the target was the longtime leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, who they have now confirmed as dead. Let's bring in our John Sparks, who's been following developments and that press conference by the IDF. Some more lines coming in, some statements from the IDF, John.
Yeah, as you say, Yalda, holding a press conference at the moment. The Israeli military saying that Nasrallah was with other senior commanders at the time of the strike or strikes. The strike was conducted while senior chain of command was operating against Israel. I think that's significant. What we have seen over the past week is this would represent a final triumph in this phase of the military operation for Israel. They have destroyed, it seems, the senior command of Hezbollah, now taking out its Secretary General. They have shown that Hezbollah, which was supposed to be this formidable military force, non-state military and political actor in Lebanon, they have shown them to be completely vulnerable. They've taken out their communications with these pager and walkie-talkie attacks. They have shown Hezbollah to be utterly unable to protect its rank-and-file members, its senior commanders, and now it seems its leader, its Secretary General. Important to say, Hezbollah has still not said anything officially about this yet. It would be, however, a complete final triumph for the Israelis in this part of the battle. I think we could talk about what Hassan Nasrallah stood for. I mean, the Israelis in these statements that they're releasing in their press conference at the moment, saying that he was one of the world's biggest terrorists. What did Hassan Nasrallah say? He was calling for the liberation of Jerusalem. He called Israel a Zionist entity. He wanted Jewish immigrants to return to their countries of origin, and he called for a Palestine with equality for all. That is how Hassan Nasrallah spoke to his followers. That's not how the Israelis saw him.
Yeah, and John, I mean, he was viewed as an incredibly charismatic orator. When he would give these sermons, young and old would gather to listen to him. He was also took credit for pushing Israel out of Lebanon in 2000. He went to the border area and declared victory. And across the Arab world, he was revered by many people who followed Hezbollah and saw them as a form of resistance. But he also was behind and led a group that he, conducted multiple terror attacks in the West, in Israel, and a number of people were killed. This man divided this nation as well.
Absolutely. He divided this nation. He divided the region. He was revered by his followers, as you say. I think it's important to mention that members of Hezbollah, their supporters, don't dwell on death in the same way that we might assume the death of or the impact of a death like this. He essentially predicted it in a speech after the assassination of a senior commander at the end of July, Fouad Shakur. He said in a recorded message, look, this is par for the course for senior leaders in this organization. He lived a life in secret. He lived a life underground.
Yeah, John, we will continue our coverage here following the announcement of the death of Hassan Nasrallah, the longtime leader of Hezbollah. Do stay with us for continued coverage. In the next few minutes, we'll be back with the very latest.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.